Okay, good afternoon. It's been a while since we've done a live stream. Channel's grown significantly over the last month or so. The view counts are significantly up. Subscriber numbers are up, and here we are. A lot has happened since the last live stream. A lot has happened. Obviously, the Euros has concluded, the Copa America has concluded, and we can discuss the fallout of those two tournaments, either by managers getting the sack, losing their jobs, resigning, or organisational issues. We also have had the Olympics opening ceremony. We're 2 days into the Paris Olympics, and already there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the Paris Olympics. It wouldn't be an Olympic Games without controversy. State of Origin has concluded. The Queensland women winning the women's State of Origin, and New South Wales winning the men's State of Origin rugby league. So that's interesting, split series, because last year Queensland won both. So that's kind of interesting, and it was the first time the women had a 3-game State of Origin series. So yeah, a lot has happened. Football news. I did a video discussing the issues surrounding French football league, the French football with financial issues with their domestic league. And a few days after I post that, Bordeaux have filed for bankruptcy and look like they're going to cease to be a club and going to have to reform at the lower levels of French football, below the professional levels, which is really disappointing. I didn't even get a chance to do the football club history video on Bordeaux before they went bust, but that's one of the more successful clubs in French football, played in the Champions League, 6 league titles, multiple domestic cup titles, and they've gone bust. So that's kind of an interesting subplot. We've been trending on, I've got to remember the website now, but a website, and which has a lot of forums and people post articles and videos, and we've been trending on there in regards to what's happening in French football. So we'll keep an eye on it if any more French clubs enter financial difficulty. I won't be surprised if more French clubs before the start of the league season basically put their hand up and say we're going into administration, we're going bankrupt, which puts a lot of pressure on the French league and the French Football Federation to come up with a TV package that can at least stabilise revenue streams, because at the moment a lot of French clubs are selling players, and part of the problem with Bordeaux is they're still technically owed money from Barcelona. So we'll see if what happens going forward with the reformation of the club at the lower levels, and what's happening to all the players who've now been released on a free, basically, and what happens to the staff who've lost their jobs, and the wider football ecosystem, because a club that size going bust is going to have a ripple effect for the wider football community. And as I said, when I did the video looking at French football and its financial issues, it's going to have a knock-on effect for other leagues around Europe. It's a combined ecosystem. These things don't happen in isolation. There will be knock-on effects for other clubs in other leagues and in other countries. And it's eventually those effects will be felt in the Premier League. The transfer window is actually, I think, going to be interesting with the new spending rules that UEFA want to have in place, and clubs to be compliant within the next few years to meet those new spending rules. There's obviously clubs getting hammered. They have given themselves a little bit more wiggle room when they go about seeking a successor to Gareth Southgate following his resignation the other week. I think they were semi-expecting a resignation from Gareth Southgate. They were happy to extend his contract, so they'd obviously had some plans in place to keep him on for another 2-year cycle. He's decided to go down the resignation route. We've covered that in detail. It's going to be interesting to see who they actually appoint. There's a lot of sources pointing at they want Pep Guardiola, but he's on contract for another 12 months. If they could afford his get-out clause at Man City, that will be quite interesting if they can actually afford his to pay the get-out clause. The FA probably would rather not have to spend the money, which says to me they're probably going to go for an interim. Most likely Lee Carsley will get the job for a year on an interim basis. He's already working within the FA with the youth setup. So that will be very, very interesting to seeing who they appoint on a full-time or interim basis. There's a lot of strong reports coming out and articles discussing the hint that they are leaning towards Guardiola, but there are other managers available and there's other managers under contract that could fit what the FA want. I think Gareth Southgate has left the England setup in a stronger position than when he took it over. I think that's the goal of any employee at any organisation, is to leave the organisation, especially when you're in a managerial role, in a better position than when you took it over. The fact that 2 finals in there and a semi-final, and that lack of actually getting over the line is a bit of a concern. But the performances, well, I think their best performances were at Euro 2020. I think that was the moment where they built upon the World Cup in 2018. I think some mistakes were made following Euro 2020, admittedly delayed by a year. But I think there were some selection problems that crept in, and there was a lot more pressure after that tournament. I don't think necessarily Southgate and his backroom staff necessarily went in the right direction with selections, formations, and tactics, which I think did cost them at the next 2 tournaments. But in saying that, England, much like France, there's a lot of criticism thrown at Deschamps, and yet he's managed to win silverware and get France to finals as well. So, it's one of those. It's a high pressure job. It's a bit of a poison chalice. I think you've got to find a very, very, very thick-skinned manager. And I think Southgate definitely improved the relationship with the players and the media, and himself, the management position and the media. And I think Southgate definitely improved the relationship with the players and the media, and himself, the management position and the media, and how the position became toxic. I've always said Sven wasn't a bad manager for England, and it's a shame that obviously he's going through, late, I think it's stage 4 or stage 5 cancer. He's very, very unwell. But the players who played under Sven-Goran Eriksson, both at club and international level, have a lot of respect for him. But I do think if they are going to go down an international overseas manager route for England, I think the FA are cautious because of what happened with Capello. Capello, very successful manager at club and international level, glittering managerial career, did not work with England. And you hear the stories that come out about the relationship Capello had with the players and the clubs when he was England manager, and the British media wasn't great. Scotland also have had that being burnt with the overseas managerial experiment with Bertie Vogts, who was also a very successful manager, success in Germany and in Europe, success with the German national side, comes to Scotland and it's an absolute shambles. So we'll see what happens. We'll also see how Craig Bellamy does as well as manager in his first senior managerial role. Quality. There's no lack of effort for that matter, but there is clearly I wouldn't say necessarily a skill gap, but a fitness, quality, and professionalism gap. And there are money issues and there are structural issues that need to be resolved. We've obviously heard a lot of these reports coming out of Australia, linking the NRL with an investment move of some kind with the Super League and the Super League structures and the leagues below, and potentially purchasing the league and buying a controlling stake or investing in the league in some way financially. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think next year's Vegas Games, I think that's dipping the toe in the water. How that will impact the World Club Challenge, we'll have to wait and see. Penrith have a very, very good chance of potentially playing in that World Club Challenge, as do Warrington and Wigan, as does the Sharks, for example, because they're battling for a top 4 spot, could potentially make a grand final. So there's a lot to think about in regards to what happens to the World Club Challenge, potentially in the short, medium and long term. So there's that. Now, the Olympics. There's already been controversy surrounding the Olympic Games. Yes. The opening ceremony, controversy. The Dutch volleyball player. As I say again, the criminal offence happened a very, very long time ago. There are strict IOC policies in place surrounding this Dutch volleyball player. As I said, what is interesting is the offence didn't happen in Holland. It happened here in the UK. Now, I understand a fair bit about I know a lot about the UK legal system, having actually studied it as a student, and seen how it works actually firsthand. I've been inside courtrooms. I've actually been inside the Houses of Parliament. That is interesting. In the regards to the selection of a someone who's committed a criminal offence. We see it in sport quite a bit. We've seen athletes go to prison for a variety of offences and then resume their professional careers thereafter. It's going to be interesting to see, the backlash in Holland. I don't know what's like the media response has been in Holland in regards to this volleyball player. But that's already drawn a lot of criticism. The IOC have had a media conference. They fronted the media. They faced a bit of backlash as well. The Dutch Olympic Committee has faced a lot of tough questions. And then you've got to ask questions of the volleyball, professional volleyball in Holland or the Netherlands, shall I say, and their disciplinary structures and their selection criteria and the whole. There's a lot of questions need to be asked about this, but we've seen it in professional sport before, where a lot of high-profile athletes have had criminal convictions for a variety of offences, to some very minor to some very, very serious, and it's a very difficult one, especially when convictions are spent, rehabilitation's been done under the probation system. I just find it interesting that the Dutch have selected him. The offence was committed overseas. He served his sentence overseas. It's a very complex situation, but the IOC and the Dutch Olympic Committee have put very stringent protocols in place for the athlete. And we'll have. I mean, he's already been booed in warm-ups and when they play games. So fans have made their opinions very, very clear on his selection. Now, whether they're French fans, Dutch fans, or just all the Olympics, all the volleyball fans in general, feelings have been made very, very clear in that regard. But we see it in a lot of sports when a player's done, an athlete's done something away from the sport, made headlines. We even see it when players have done things in a game or in the media surrounding things where they've made comments or whatever. Fans will target a player for their misdeeds. We see it in association football, we see it in rugby league, we see it in rugby union. When there's a controversial player, the fans will boo them. The fans will chant about them. There will be very awkward questions in the media. It becomes a bit of a circus. In this regard, it's complex. But that's one controversy. Another controversy is the Olympic opening ceremony. The Olympic flag hoisted upside down. Some people not overly impressed with the opening ceremony as a whole. OTT ceremony. The tongue-in-cheek humour surrounding the drag show and the Last Supper has annoyed diehard Christians. Personally, I didn't watch the opening ceremony. I know the weather was absolutely horrendous for the opening ceremony, even though here in the UK it stopped raining. In France, it's now raining quite heavily. It's rained throughout the opening couple of days of the Olympic Games. We haven't even got to the football and the rugby controversy surrounding Argentina. We'll get there in a minute. But a lot of people have complained about the opening ceremony. Some were saying it's too over the top. A lot of locals and people who are in Paris for business, not for the Olympics, have been disrupted by road closures and restrictions, and the app's not working and access being denied when it's, they haven't got the communication right there. Others were comical about the boats going down the Seine and the disruption it's caused to the city of Paris and France in general, the no-fly zone. And then we get to the arson attacks on the trains, the transportation network feeling the strain, and some of the organisational headaches that come with that. But raising the Olympic flag upside down and calling South Korea North Korea is probably not the best way to ingratiate yourself with your guests. But then we've now moved on to the River Seine and the pollution levels being too high. So the triathlon and the biathlon and all those, I think it's the triathlon, the swim, cycle and run event. The athletes can't do their swim practice, which is a problem because pollution levels are too high. The pH level isn't right, and they're concerned about pollution in the river. There's been a huge effort to try and clean up the river. So they're now doing their training at a backup location. They may have to move the event to a different river or a different water course. So there's been that kind of issues there. I don't know why they can't use the rowing lake for a day, but that's another thing entirely. So there's concerns about water quality for the open water swimmers. They had those same issues at Rio with pollution concerns and water quality concerns. So there's been a bit of controversy so far. we have to discuss what happened between Argentina and Morocco in the group stages of the Olympic football, with the game that took 4 hours to complete, and then was a bit of a farce, pitch invasions. So question marks about the security have got to be raised. That was the first controversy of the Olympics. There will be more. There will be no doubt athletes who fail drugs tests. There will be judges accused of dodgy marking. There will be other controversies that will be quite discussion worthy. So we shall see how that all plays out. After the first 4 days of the games, Australia are actually topping the medal table as of midnight. So the end of yesterday's action, Australia were top of the medal table. Going into today's final, medal events. I don't think that's ever happened before, that Australia have been top of the medal table after day one. The UK, or GB in Northern Ireland, having 2 medals on the opening day, that hasn't happened since the 80s. And the first women's medal in diving since, I think, 1960. So there are some records already getting broken in that sense. It's been a very interesting opening day. Full official day, because obviously the field hockey and the football and the rugby sevens obviously started before the official opening ceremony, because they have group stages and you need to have rest and turnaround between matches, and France winning the men's gold in the rugby sevens with Antoine Dupont. I mean, you couldn't make that up. And him being out the 15s Union side has had an impact on the French test side. But him winning a gold medal, I think, sums up his decision and the French Rugby Federation in luring him into the Olympic qualifying and therefore into the Olympic setup. They win that gold. I think that vindicates their decision to entice him into sevens for the last 12 months. Yeah, I think it vindicates that selection. But yeah, there's been some very awkward press conferences already. There has been controversy. It wouldn't be an Olympics without one, which reminds me, I will be doing a video on the 1976 Montreal Games and the controversy in the lead up to that Olympics, with all the political issues, corruption, strikes, and basically being a pretty crap Olympics. The Montreal 76 Olympics is an Olympics I need to look at. What is also interesting is going forward, the Olympic bidding process for the IOC has changed. France has been awarded the 2030 Winter Olympics in the Alps, the Rhone Alps region. So multiple towns and cities will be host venues for the Winter Olympics in 2030, which is quite interesting. Of course, LA will be the only other city to bid for this Olympics. They get the next one. And there's a big discussion about Southern California being the next Olympics host for the Summer Games. There's also a discussion about NHL players competing at the next Winter Olympics in 2026 in Milan and Cortina. So again, an Olympics been split between 2 cities, which is quite interesting. I find that quite interesting because it's quite expensive to host an Olympic Games, and sometimes the financial rewards just aren't there. Apparently, this Paris Olympics, the spending was $9 billion US. So it's actually one of the cheaper Olympics in real terms to be hosted. There were already a lot of venues already in place that the French organisers could basically just upgrade slightly or prepare for the games, which saves money. They've spent more on, I think, security and transportation than actual sporting venues, because they already have venues that are basically IOC Olympic standard in place. So we'll see how much money the Olympics actually makes, but it only costs around $9 billion to bid for the games, put the infrastructure in place, and all the other associated costs with staffing levels, getting items of merchandise prepared, manufactured, and we'll see if it actually makes money back. Now, in regards to the broadcasting, I'm quite frustrated about the broadcasting here in the UK in regards to the Olympics. BBC used to have all the coverage. Now it's with Eurosport, obviously, basically having the sharing the same feed. Warner Brothers Discovery, but owns Eurosport, also owns TNT Sports here in the UK. It's behind a paywall. It's crap, and they get all the events, whereas the BBC gets selected events, which I find disappointing. And that's going to be the deal in place here in the UK, broadcast-wise, for the next 5 Olympics, winter and summer. So I'm not very happy with that. It means I can't watch as many events. I'm not paying for just Warner Brothers Discovery. I'm not paying for it. I was pissed off when they put the UEFA European Club Finals basically behind a paywall. They basically won't even let you have you have to pay for it. which I think is a retrograde move, and I can see a lot of sports fans who otherwise would when I say sports fans, potential sports fans, the casual viewer being put off. This is at a time when obviously people can't afford to heat their homes, feed their kids, pay their bills, even though they work 40 to 60 hours a week. There's a cost of living crisis. I'm not happy with the broadcasting side of things. I felt broadcasting after the first few days is crap, to be honest. Not a fan of it. It's not as good as what it was in London 2012 or before then. I used to be a very passionate Olympics viewer until around 2018, Winter Olympics in 2018, and then I just fell out of love with the Olympic Games. There's just so much controversy surrounding the Olympics. There always has been. So I'll be looking at controversial Olympics. I'm going to start with the 76 Games in Montreal. We'll look at the Moscow Games in 1980, the 84 Games in LA. And then we'll look at positive, less controversial Olympics like Calgary in 88, very positive one. Vancouver in 2010, the Winter Games. Brilliant. Lillehammer in 94 was fantastic. Bit of controversy there, though. And then we'll look at the Summer Olympics from like Atlanta 96 all the way through to now, basically. And some have been very controversial. Some have been really good. And they always divide opinion. But the IOC is finding it difficult now to find host countries and cities for the Olympics, partly because of the cost. Cost has always been an issue. Now, discussing what's happening in French football. So I did the video a couple of weeks ago discussing the financial crisis that is engulfing French football and the future of not only the French top flight, but football in France in general at club level, the financial issues the French league structure faces, and the fact that in the top league, Ligue 1, eight clubs are basically facing bankruptcy. Now, that is nearly half the French top flight could go out of business before the end of next month. So basically the first week of the season. And I've been looking at how much the TV deal's worth, how much not having a TV deal in place is harming clubs. I discussed PSG and their spending, how it's basically made the league unattractive for other investors. It's made it unattractive for fans. And people say, TV is bad for attendance. Having all these games on TV is bad for attendance. Attendance is crap even when the games were on TV. Now they're off TV. With only a handful of games on TV, attendance is still crap. When you know that only one club is going to basically be realistically competing for the title every season, occasionally you might get an underdog story like we have seen occasionally in French football, but for the most part, it's PSG. And then a team might have a one-off season, like Lille, for example. And then they go away and it's PSG again. It makes the sport unattractive because it's uncompetitive. Fans like competitive nature of sport. It's the whole point of it. When you know your club is going to get battered, or when you know your club has no realistic chance of being able to compete for a title, or just compete on the same level, you're not going to watch because you know that the result is preordained simply because of the amount of money one club has. The Neymar transfer, I don't think we see that record broken. I actually do think that we've reached a point with football finances where we have reached crisis point. I think Bordeaux, being one of the biggest clubs basically to go bust ever, I do mean that, with the amount of silverware they've won in domestic French football, the fact they've been in the Champions League multiple times, Cup Winners' Cup multiple times, UEFA Cup multiple times, they've been a regular appearer in Europe over the years. With the fact that Bordeaux has now basically gone, we're bankrupt, we're liquidating, we're reforming as an amateur club right at the bottom, that's got to be a warning sign that the money bubble has now officially burst. The fact that Barcelona still owe them money for the Malcolm transfer that took place years ago, they're still waiting for that money. That's pre-COVID money they're waiting for. Tells you how scummy Barcelona are, because that is not an isolated incident with Barcelona. They owe a lot of clubs money in regards to unpaid or delayed transfer fees that had meant to be paid by now. So Barcelona, questions do need to be asked about the fact that are the footballing authorities in Spain and Europe too scared to take on a club that's classed as too big to fail? No one is too big to fail. When you have got a serial champion like Bordeaux, people they haven't won in Europe, doesn't matter. Look at their trophy cabinet. They're quite a successful club, a lot of success, a lot of silverware. When a club of that size goes bust, it tells you all you need to know about the state of club football at the highest level. It tells you that the finances are broken, completely broken, unsustainable. And it says to me that, the money bubble has started to burst. It's deflating, which says to me that I don't think the Neymar transfer record ever gets broken. I cannot see it. I cannot see how that kind of spending can be justified. I think the players now have to realise they're going to have to take pay cuts or less money in their next contracts. It's going to have to happen. That kind of wage inflation is not sustainable. Absolutely not sustainable. And I remember reading an article, the average salary for the season I was born in, which was the 89-90 season, per year was around £70,000 here in the top flight in England and Scotland. So in the UK, the average salary for a player in the top flight in England and Scotland was around 70,000 a year. Let that sink in. That's over 52 weeks of a year, or however long, or 9 months of a season. 70 grand, around that figure. Now I can actually find. I'll actually find that figure, pull it up, but roughly in the 70 grand range. Now, I'm just going to quickly have a little search, and we will find the average salary for. Oh God. So I was born in 89. Well, let's have a look. What was the average salary for a footballer in 89-90? Right. Oh, here we go. This is quite interesting. So, back in 2011, this first article that came up. So let's have a look what the first article actually said. If it ever bloody loads. It's loading. Okay, let's have a little look. What original? Right. Official English football wages for the last 25 years. So this was published on the 30th of October 2011. Right. Let's have a look at. Oh, great! It has to be the smallest graph in the world. Wow, even less than I thought. The average worker's wage in 89-90 was £15,340 per year was the average salary for a worker in this country. So I actually earn more than the average salary in the 80s, not now. For the average football player, £41,600 was the average salary of a top flight player in England in the 89-90 season, which is basically double of what I earn now. That was a year, which is only 3 times the average salary of the average worker. Now, that article is quite a bit outdated. Now, I'm trying to find a bit more. Oh wow! So the average salary for a top flight football player now has risen by 65% since 2000. So that's exploded, but it doesn't really tell us. But now the average salary is about 60 grand a week. So there you go. That is quite interesting. So that's quite interesting. How the average salary was 3 times for a footballer was 3 times the average worker's salary in the country in the 89-90 season, just 3 times. Yeah, that's mad. How it's not the same anymore. Absolutely mad. And I do think that sums up a lot of the issues that um, hit. That's why fans find it, I would say, difficult to afford tickets. And we were told that the TV deals the Premier League and other sports leagues have signed would keep ticket prices low and attendances wouldn't be affected. Ticket prices are not low, I can tell you that. So that's something that I find quite striking. Is one survey done, admittedly over a decade ago, shows that the average salary for a player per year wasn't actually that bad. I think it was quite reasonable if you think about the average salary for an average worker plus the average salary of a football player only being 3 times the difference. I wouldn't think that now. That would be less than the average salary a week for a player now was a yearly salary when I was born. So you can definitely see where the disparity is, and you could definitely say that the current TV deal and the sponsor is the wages are overinflated, massively overinflated, and that does have a negative impact on what we see and the quality we get, and I find that quite striking that the average salary has ballooned in such a way that instead of being 3 times the average salary of a worker in the country, or near enough, it's now 3 times the average worker's salary in a week for a player. That's ridiculous. I remember when Alexis Sanchez left Arsenal for Man United, he was paid like 34 million per year. Now that doesn't take in, is that before or after tax? And it doesn't take into account signing bonuses. So I think what we're seeing with some of the spending and how the finances work, I do think we've reached a point where I think the money bubble has potentially not only burst, but I think it's definitely reached a point where football as an economy, as an economic sector in professional sports, is definitely overheated. And I was having this discussion the other day. I was on a train, or waiting for a train. Train was delayed. Got into a discussion with some other people. One of them actually was a member of the House of Lords, ironically, so a serving politician. Got into a conversation. Train turns up. Carry on the conversation on the train because we're on the same carriage. And I basically said what I do is in my spare time, which is this. And I basically said there is a storm coming that's going to hit professional football and potentially other sports. And I said currently professional football is basically the subprime mortgage crisis of 15 years ago. The same principles are in place. There's been money spent that isn't there. There's a huge amount of debt. There's a lot of bad contracts in place that have been signed. And there's a lot of murky middlemen shifting money around. And there's late payments. There's clearly clubs basically being those who are applying for a mortgage are paying for stuff they can't afford. The repayments that they're paying on agents' fees, on wages, on transfers, they're not earning enough to cover that expenditure. So basically, I said the subprime mortgage crisis, which was also very similar for other businesses who were given bad loans as well. They're going to administration and liquidation because they've got bad business models. I said, look, football is basically, you look at the subprime mortgage crisis and how the economics of that and what led to that was poor regulation. We have that in football. Crap-ass regulation, very weak, poor regulation. Money being spent in the form of debt on promises that this debt will be paid. So really bad financial transactions. Overcharging for your customer base. And continuing to raise prices, and then you actually get people turning away. So you're overcharging your customers. You're overpaying your staff. Bad business model. Same with clubs, paying for things with money they don't have. The football economy is built upon debt, unstructured debt, lots of bad contracts, And they looked at me and they went, you're basically comparing the football economy and the football finances to the banks going bust. I said, yes. There is corruption in there. There's dodgy payments. There's tax avoidance. There's basically Ponzi schemes taking place. There's debt coming out of its arsehole. Clubs will go bust. Within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a club has just gone bust. A big European club has gone bust. It's owed money by another club, can't pay its staff, can't pay its players, goes into liquidation. I did the video on the French league. That comes out, news comes out that 8 clubs in the French top flight are facing bankruptcy. And yeah, we are going to see the bricks are going to fall. It's like a Jenga tower. You take little bits out of that structure, it's going to collapse. We are seeing clubs at the lower level of the game across Europe going bust all the time. Eventually, if you keep removing these bricks, the building falls down. If you have a weak base, you cannot sustain the tower. Look at the Tower of Pisa. It leans for a reason. They screwed up the foundations. The fact that clubs like Nuneaton Borough have gone and Torquay was saved at the last minute, Southend are about to go bust. These are clubs that have played in the Football League. The fact they're struggling, Reading, uncertain future. Everton, even with their new stadium build, issues surrounding the potential takeover and funding of that club. It's a Premier League club. If Everton go belly up, and I think there's a fair chance that could happen, the knock-on impact for the rest of the Premier League and the rest of the European leagues is going to be even bigger than what's happened with Bordeaux. Much bigger fan base, much more successful club, actually won trophies in Europe, more league, one of the most successful clubs in European football historically. Hasn't been successful for a long time, but if Everton goes belly up, much bigger domino effect. But I think Bordeaux, as a top flight club, has started the domino effect. It's a matter of time before some bigger dominoes start falling. And the fact that, look how Man United are cutting costs ruthlessly. So Jim Ratcliffe hasn't been the saviour that fans think he is. The Glazers still have a majority controlling stake. There's conflicts of interest with Man City owning multiple clubs and transferring players between those clubs. Couldn't make that one up. Getting away with it because they're not going to be playing in the same European competition next season. But Man United and Nice can't transfer a player because they are playing. You couldn't make up that. That's a conflict of interest. Then they suddenly changed the rules. It's just ridiculous. I think it should be one club. That's it. That's all you're allowed to own, not multiple clubs in the same sport. If you want to own teams in other sports, fine. But the fact that Red Bull own 2 football clubs, Man City Group own God knows how many. Ineos has multiple clubs in multiple different leagues. It starts to get, hang on a second, there's something not right here. The fact this has been allowed for so long is kind of troubling. And then people are defending these actions. It's like, no. Professional sport is a different economy than the wider industrial world. It really is. So there's that to consider. There's a lot of troubling things happening in professional sport right now. A lot of troubling things. The fact that there's multiple clubs under investigation for financial breaches. There's going to be more clubs with points deductions this coming season. The Man City investigation hasn't gone away, and I think if the Premier League and FA get their investigation wrong, well, they can't win either way. But the fact that there's been weak governance for decades tells you all you need to know about the situation. But if we know that Man City are guilty, UEFA found them guilty. They got off on a very, very dodgy technicality. Let's not pretend that Man City are innocent, but the punishment's going to be interesting because I think that would damage the reputation of football more. And fans may just start switching off football altogether. I work with a lot of football fans, and a couple of them are diehard Tottenham fans. A pre-season friendly, the cheapest tickets for a pre-season friendly, £80 for the crap seats at the rebuilt White Hart Lane, the nosebleeds, 80 quid. Now, there isn't really a bad seat in the new stadium. Not a fan of the new stadium, how it looks and some of the stuff. But 80 quid for a nosebleed for a friendly is a joke. And then the club are saying we can't sign really expensive players. But you claim you're one of the big 6. It's just mad. Where's the money going? Where's the money going? They can't even get naming rights for their stadium, but that's Daniel Levy for you. £80 for a pre-season friendly. That is obscene. And then people wonder why families, kids, working class people are switching off. Why there are issues. When you've got, people, UEFA and FIFA going, we need to attract more young people to watch games. Stop putting it behind an expensive paywall. Make it accessible. It's not hard. It's not hard, is it? Really? It's not frigging hard. And then when you're charging people 80, 90, 100 quid for a nosebleed seat for a pre-season friendly, that tells you all you need to know. That yes, costs have gone up, but that is extortionate, that is extreme, and quite frankly is obscene. Absolutely 100% obscene. That is wrong. That is wrong on so many levels. It's not right. In my opinion, it's unsustainable, especially when you look at the costs of everyday items. I go to the shops, and I look at price of bread, price of milk, basic household items, basic food items. I can't afford to buy them. I'm going hungry some days because at the moment this channel's not making revenue. It will do soon. We'll be able to get memberships and super chats available for live streams, and hopefully merchandise available to be bought. So we're getting close to the monetization goal. I have a full-time job. Some days I'm struggling to pay the frigging bills at the end of the month, so I can't treat myself to nice things. I mean, this was a gift from a friend. A lot of stuff I have, I've either found doing my day job, waste disposal. A lot of memorabilia people throw out, don't realise how much it's worth. But some of the other stuff, some of my other sports memorabilia, are gifts from friends and family, like birthday presents, Christmas presents, that kind of thing. Or they're having a clear out. Like, do you want this? I said, yeah, cool. So I got my NFL gear from an old work colleague who's a friend, because his now wife, they were expecting a baby at the time, and then we need to have a clear out. Do you want some NFL gear? Don't see why not. I'm happy to have it. Didn't cost me a penny, thankfully. But no, the price of tickets and the price of merchandise is obscene. I'm very, very lucky that I've got the limited collection that I have. I would dread to think what the prices are now for those items now, new or secondhand. I haven't collected anything by going to a store or going online and looking for it for some time. I was looking at some stuff online the other week, and I'm like, that's just not affordable. And some of it, limited stock, only limited items left, and they're not in my size, which is frustrating. To get stuff in my size is annoying because I'm quite slim. I've got quite long arms, but I've got quite a slim body, so I want it to be reasonably comfortable, on the tour wearing it. It's difficult. It's difficult to sometimes find items to fit, and especially when you're buying stuff from foreign leagues, it's very difficult to get the sizing right. The US sizes, Canadian sizes, Australian sizes, European sizes, UK sizes, all vary. And so sometimes it just looks like you're wearing a medieval suit of chain mail that's meant to be baggy and deflectable. It just looks ridiculous, and you feel ridiculous wearing something that's 2-3 sizes too big. And it's a pain in the arse being skinny and lanky. It really is. But yeah, a lot of people find that issue where they go to one manufacturer. So this is Nike, as you can see, it's Nike, and it's not their sizing is completely different to Adidas, for example, or a European kit manufacturer or manufacturer of an item. The sizing is different, and that is frustrating. There's not uniform, universal clothing sizing. 1 second, I'm going to get a refill. Yes, it does look like Anton Dupont's gamble paid off. French rugby, get the thumbs up. 1 second, we'll be back. Oh. Oh. Needed a refill. I need to get myself a mini fridge for when I'm doing live streams, because to walk to the fridge in the kitchen and back, it's actually quite a walk, and I really am very lazy. And it's quite straight. If I had a mini fridge down here, I could just open the fridge, get a soft drink out or an energy drink out, and not have to walk, what was that, about 10 meters, something like that. DuPont, it's a gamble that's paid off. Obviously, it's impacted the national side when it comes to the test side, but it's a gamble that's paid off. The French have got a very strong system for both sevens and 15s. So it is a gamble that's paid off. But at the same time, with the amount of money France has spent on the Olympics, bidding for it, putting it on, it's cost them the Rugby League World Cup, which was an opportunity to grow the other code in the country. That is a blow. Now, we know that the Rugby League World Cup is going to be played a year late in Australia and Papua New Guinea. And there's a debate about, whether PNG should have that 300 million Australian dollars pumped into with as aid investment from the Australian government, whether they should have a fully pro NRL team. There's a lot of debate about that expansion, and it's been quite controversial. But the fact that we have a Rugby League World Cup sorted for 2026, I think is good. It's a shame that New Zealand aren't co-hosting or hosting it. I think they could have hosted it by themselves. The fact they weren't considered is a massive blow, I think, with how the Warriors have managed to rekindle the love for the sport in New Zealand in recent years, and the way the fan base has responded to the kit change back to the original colours, the original branding, and how they played last season, and in patches this season. That's interesting. What you wonder if any other big rugby stars will do it in the future. Rugby union has the international exposure that rugby league lacks. We've seen it in the women's game where female players have done sevens and gone back to rugby league. I think less likely in the men's, because the limited nature of who's going to host the Olympics. The bidding process has completely changed, basically. Countries and cities are very wary about taking on the expenditure of an Olympic Games and all the pitfalls and hurdles and controversy that surrounds it, which is why we're now starting to see Milan and Cortina host the Winter Olympics 2 years' time. They're splitting it from one host city to two, and the Winter Olympics after that is going to be all in the French Alps. The fact that LA were awarded the Olympics with an extra 4 years in advance to plan and prepare, you can see what's happening here. The fact that only two cities ended up doing the final bid for this Olympics, Paris winning, LA getting the next Olympics. The IOC has basically realised they couldn't get any cities to bid for 2028. That's the thing. The IOC could not guarantee any cities would place a bid for the next Summer Games. They could not guarantee that any city or cities would bid for the Winter Olympics after next. So they just gave it to France. But, well, you're going to host this. You've already got the infrastructure in place. Have that. Oh, and you're going to have it over a whole region, not just in one town. Oh, yeah, have it. The IOC is banking on doing it this way to try and encourage in the future cities to bid, like they did with LA in '84. There was a big thing where at that time, the IOC was facing a massive problem. There was security. Obviously, what happened, Mexico City, there was political unrest in Mexico in the 60s, military junta, political unrest, social unrest. Munich in '72, the hostage crisis, which ended in a bloody mess, quite literally. And '76 in Montreal being an absolute disaster from the day Montreal was given the games to getting the games hosted, with strikes, corruption, and then the legacy being a mess as well. With the men's side for GB fan to qualify, do you think union or league stars who aren't playing should switch to playing sevens? I don't know. I think there's that the issues with the sevens not qualifying is you've got to get 4 unions to release players, because players who are from Northern Ireland technically represent Ireland at international level. And you've got Wales and Scotland and England. They've all got to cooperate better. It's like basically like the Lions. They could have a Lions sevens program. They do not have that, which is a thought for the future. So you've got to try and combine 4 nations worth of sevens programs and find those players who are from Northern Ireland who represent Ireland at test level, which is 2 separate nations competing as one. A bit like the West Indies in cricket. To commit to an Olympic program and a GB7 side, and it's complicated. It's very, very complicated in that regard, unless you use one of them as the basis as the core of the squad, and you select certain players from the other nations to represent. It gets very complicated. There's a reason why we don't, apart from the London games that we've had over the years where football's been part of the program of the Olympics. It's why we don't really see a GB football side, because you've again got to get 4 FAs to agree. And even for London 2012, Scotland were a pain in the arse, apparently. Yes. as I say, when we were hosting the 2012 Olympics, the core of both the men's and women's teams for football were England, with a handful of selected players from the other home nations. The problem is the Scottish FA proved a pain in the arse, basically. The Scottish FA were a pain in the arse for both the men's and women's in the London 2012 games. So it's getting that cooperation between different governing bodies within the UK and Northern Ireland to work together, basically. It's very, very difficult. Yes. Again, the core of that team will be the England team. The core of the team will be the England team. And that then raises questions on the diversity of the four home nations and backgrounds of players. And it's just a pain in the arse. It's a lot of politics off the field, which harms the sport on the field, if that makes sense. But having rugby back at the Olympics is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic having it back at the games. Some say rugby league should be involved in the Olympics as well. With now the Olympics allowing professional athletes to compete, which wasn't a thing back in the day. You had to be an amateur. Wales, but well, again, you've got to sort out payments as well, and how they would work about the qualification process, releasing players from their clubs, because now you've got centralised contracts with the women's game, and women players now getting paid in both codes. You've now got professional female players in league and union. So if you have a rugby league program at the Olympics as well, with the nines, for example, could be a good way to go with rugby league. It's having the discussions with their clubs, because it's basically semi-pro, but they're getting professional contracts, but it's basically semi-pro for the most part. Is allowing those players the flexibility with their work, because a lot of them are students or have day jobs, as well as getting paid to play. So they're basically semi-pro at this point, and releasing them and giving them that window to compete. But yeah, no, Wales has got money problems, and it's who pays for their medical expenses, who pays for their travel. Is it the GB Olympic Committee? Sport GB? Is it our Olympic? Is it which union picks up the tab? Because and then you've got to think about, well, what about the players from Northern Ireland? Do they represent Ireland or GB? It starts getting a mess. I think Wales, in regards to rugby union, would be a pain in the arse to get a rugby program together. I think the cooperation there does not exist. And in football, I think it's Scotland and the other three FAs don't particularly get on either. I think it's going to be a pain in the arse either way you look at it. And I think, again, a lot of politics, which is harming the potential for a very strong team to be fielded in multiple sporting disciplines. Far too much politics, which I don't think in any way, shape, or form benefits the sport. I just don't think it does. I think it does a lot of harm. I think it definitely damages things. It definitely causes a lot of problems unnecessarily, whereas other sports do have a national governing body. Even in ice hockey, even though there's different governing bodies, we have a national side, GB in Northern Ireland, that competes at the World Championships, that's going through Olympic qualification for the Winter Olympics. So ice hockey manages to do it with different governing bodies in England, which covers Wales as well, and Scotland, which covers Northern Ireland when it comes to prefer. We managed to have a governing body for the Elite League. We've got a governing body for the leagues in England and Wales, National League, and then we've got a governing body for Scotland, which covers the Scottish League. But they all managed to seem to, when it comes to selection for the national side, work. At the various age levels as well, players get released. They're allowed to play. They're allowed to represent their country in regards to tournaments and qualification for tournaments. Why can't this be done in rugby union and rugby league and football? Why is it so difficult in the more popular team sports? Why do we make it so difficult upon ourselves to have cooperation just once every few years? Just have some cooperation. Why is that so hard? Why is that so hard to achieve when another international team that says GB in Northern Ireland can do it with different governing bodies? and different levels of funding and involvement and cooperation. Why is it so difficult for football, rugby union, rugby league to cooperate with each other? I just do not understand it. It's mind-boggling to me. It's frustrating. I think it harms the image that you're trying to promote. It's more divisive. There's a lot, as I say, a lot of politics off the field, which hampers the product on the field. But we've seen it with other sports in other countries as well. Where you've got regional governing bodies, there's no strong national governing body, money, player payments, player insurance, TV deals. It all gets a mess. But it's like the NHL and competing at the Olympics, and allowing the players to have that bugger, the allowing the players to participate at the Olympics, and the how do I put it? It's very similar to the NHL releasing players. I think is the best example I can think of where a governing body or a professional league with its governing body, the NHL, has a poor relationship with the IOC, which then has a mixed relationship with the IIHF. And the IIHF seems to be the intermediary between the professional league, the Olympic governing, IOC and the Olympics, and how that's that poor relationship. And again, it's who pays for the players' medical bills, who pays for their appearance fees, insurance. The professional teams, the professional league, we've got to shut down the league, so we lose income for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long the Olympic tournament lasts. We've got to release the players for Olympic qualifying potentially. It just becomes a very political and logistical nightmare. Now, the fact that the next Winter Olympics is in Europe, we've seen that that's not bad for US TV and Canadian TV. The majority of ice hockey fans in the US and Canada are on the East Coast or the Midwest, sort of the prairie provinces. So that's, a 5-6 hour, maybe 7 hour time difference, basically east of the Rockies or east of the Mississippis, where the majority of fans of that sport live in North America. And so TV viewership is going to be good because the IOC is banking on real high TV viewership because of the TV contracts and advertisers and how much money that's worth. And then I see the sports sponsorship for this Olympics, and when I watch NRL broadcasts, you see the NRL partners like Harvey Norman, big. We are proud to sponsor our athletes. Over here, when I'm watching, let's say, Sky News, advert comes on, or when I'm on YouTube, and it'll say we're sponsoring our athletes, UK sponsor. I saw it with the Euros with the advertising campaigns that players did when I was watching the ITV feed. A lot of high-profile players signed up for their, sponsorship agreements. So you had, Jack Grealish with Hellmann's, which I believe is a Unilever brand. You had, Declan Rice with Muller with their yogurts. The Muller Rice Corners because of his name. That's a pretty. I've seen it with Raheem Sterling with Gillette. Joe Hart back in the day with Doritos. You will see these high-profile athletes will have a third-party sponsor outside of their contract, and they do TV ads or internet ads. I see it a lot, and that's something that's quite discussion worthy. So there is that. In regards to trying to get high-profile athletes to represent at the Olympics when they're professionals, we've had this debate before. Rugby union has only been back in the Olympic program for less than a decade, but there's a lot of debate about potentially getting rugby league in there with some of the green shoots of growth we've seen There is a big debate about getting rugby league in there, but is there enough international growth there to do it? And there's also the discussion about other sports potentially, being at the Olympics, like cricket, for example. So that's an interesting one. Always very, very interesting in that regard. But no, it's an interesting question. Will other rugby stars do what Antoine Dupont's done? It's interesting. I think, him deciding and having an agreement with the French Rugby Federation following the World Cup and skipping the Six Nations to be part of the Sevens programme for the second half of the season for this Olympics has paid off. Maybe he stays in there permanently. Maybe he decides, I'm going to play Sevens for a couple of years. It's been vindicated, though. Home Olympics, winning gold. Not bad going. I think Dupont and the French Rugby Federation have been vindicated with that choice. It's going to be interesting whether he decides to return to the test setup. It's going to be very interesting if he decides to return to the test setup with how they've struggled a little bit without his presence in the squad. But he is the world's best player. Or definitely, if he's not, I think he's in the top 5. But that's subjective. He's one of the world's best players. But it's like, for example, in regards to football, like when you have football at the Olympics, only 2 over the age of 23 allowed in the squad. It's like, I don't know how you would do it. Like getting David Luiz for Brazil, for example, someone of that kind of experience and age, who's won trophies, and getting Neymar to want to go to the Olympics with Brazil at his age and with what goes on with his non-playing life. It's an interesting one. I don't know, who would be the best player in the world right now? Best player in the world right now. Mbappe at the Olympics, if it was a football tournament. Getting him to go through the Olympic program and playing with a load of the under-21s, something along those lines, or N'Golo Kante, for example, a player at the end of his career in the midfield, and who would you get to coach it? And there's all that. Talking about football, obviously, Gareth Southgate's replacement did a video on the potential successes and the betting odds. And of course, Guardiola appears to be a lot of people's favourite. He's under contract for the next year. And the FA apparently are very, very keen on getting Guardiola to be the next permanent coach or a future coach for the England national setup. It'd be very, very interesting. Guardiola's made no secret of the fact that he wants to coach at international level. Same with Klopp. Klopp's also made no secret of wanting to coach at international level. So that will be interesting to see whether, with Klopp being available and not having to have a get-out clause of a contract and Guardiola under contract, if the FA, have very strong discussions with them. From what I can gather, Guardiola is going to see out his contract for the next 12 months, but they need to get someone in place soon because the Nations League World Cup qualifiers are only around the corner, and the season starts in 2 weeks? So it's going to be interesting to see who they do actually appoint. There's a few options out there. A lot of rumours circulating around Eddie Howe being the replacement. A lot of rumours. The pool of available managers is not as deep as people think. There are some out-the-box options that I've discussed. I wouldn't mind seeing like a Jurgen Klinsmann, who's played in this country, been an international manager before, worked well with the same kind of way Southgate did in regards to repairing the relationship between clubs and international and just the youth structures and the pathways. Jurgen Klinsmann could be a perfect fit for England. He's actually quite popular in this country as Klinsmann. He's worked for the British media before in the past. It's about, will he want to relocate from the US? We haven't even discussed the Copa America, and I will discuss that in a minute, what happened at the Copa America final and some of the other issues the Copa America had, because that was a very Copa America. But Southgate's replacement is going to be very, very interesting. The list of potential English managers is slim. The list of potential foreign managers is not as deep as it. It's a difficult job. It's a high pressure job. A lot of scrutiny. It's possibly one of the top 5 toughest jobs in the sport. One of the top 5 hardest positions to fill. With what is expected, the expectation year after year, tournament after tournament, and the pressure that comes with the media and the fans. I would say it's in one of the top 5 footballing jobs that is basically a poison chalice. Kazi is a good choice, wouldn't it? Plus, you'll bring something. Yeah, Lee Kazi, I think. Yeah, but a lot of people aren't overly enthused by the potential for Lee Carsley to be the replacement for Southgate because he's the FA's guy in that sense, playing safe, basically. But it would be a lot cheaper for the FA if they're concerned about cost of contracts, upgrading the contracts. He works for the FA. He's been part of the setup and the structures. So that in that regard, it's easier to transition by just basically promoting him. It costs them less money. They don't have to negotiate a salary. Well, this is what Southgate was earning after bonuses and with experience, reaching certain levels of tournaments. Here's your basic salary. They could basically go on the same wage structure that Southgate had. And then extensions and bonuses, we can work in a similar fashion should you meet these goals. Whereas other managers, they've either got to pay a football club a clause to get them out of their contract, the break clause, and compensate a club, be it in this country or overseas, and go, can we nick your manager, please? Bearing in mind the season starts, your professional season starts in a couple of weeks, or in some clubs' cases, they're already playing competitive matches for qualification for the European competitions. That's a disruption clubs don't want. So there could be a potential candidate they like, but the club that he manages is going through a qualification process for Europe. They're already playing competitive games. That's just a nightmare clubs don't want. And with the transfer window now fully underway, and managers wanting to get players signed, that's a disruption clubs just do not want. Yes, but this was Euro 2020, and this latest tournament were 2 of the youngest squads England's. In fact, I think the youngest squads England's ever taken to a major international tournament was Euro 2020 and this last Euros. The 2 youngest squads ever on average age, younger than the squad that wins the '66 World Cup. So I don't understand why people are complaining if you look at the average age of the players. A lot of the players in the squad. This was, I think, one of the youngest squads we've ever taken. I think Euro 2020 was one of the youngest squads we've ever taken to a major tournament. So I don't buy that. I think what was complained about the most was the style of play that we were playing. And even though we weren't getting results in games we should have been getting results in, and we weren't winning games we should win, but we weren't losing games that we were losing for. It's the style of play and how we got to the final whistling games. And the tactics, and some of the squad selections raised some eyebrows, some of the depths, concerns, taking injured players to tournaments, repeating the same actions, expecting a different outcome, sign of badness. But I understand the I wouldn't say comfort, but I understand the logic behind the FA if they were to appoint him. I can understand the logic. Now, I'm not someone who follows the youth grades, as I would call it, the youth levels or the reserves. I'm not someone who keeps an eye on the up and cut. I think when you come to like the age grades or youth level, or in some sports reserve level or development leagues, you may be really good at that level, like a player or a coach might be really good at that level. Then you take that step up to the senior side and it just doesn't work, or the level above, the senior level. I see it in ice hockey a lot in this country. Players may be really, really good, solid players at the second tier level. Coaches as well. They take that step up to the level above. They just cannot compete. They're not at that elite level they need to be at, or the higher level. Either to do with fitness or skill level, cardio, various little things, or maybe a bit of all three. The pressure environment, the mental aspect, dealing with better players. So, yes, you may see the under-23s or the under-21s player development. They're getting a lot of minutes, but they're playing against other under-21s. They're not playing against a seasoned veteran, like a seasoned centre-back who's going to put an elbow in that first header, that first challenge. But a little elbow in the back, knee in there, more physical, bit more experience, nous, better vision, more rounded talent. Oh, that midfielder against another midfielder, box-to-box midfielders. That other midfielder who's a senior level player is going to have that extra half a yard, that extra bit of vision, more developed game. There are some young players who storm in at the age of 16, 17, 18, make their debut with the senior side and have a 20-year career and are superstars. Messi, the class of 92 at Man United being a whole group of players coming through at the same time. Then there are others who just don't quite kick on at the senior professional level. There are plenty of examples there. But let's look at the recent successful managers. Scaloni, yes. Yes. Both in the men's and women's games, yes. Junior coaches have taken that step up because of the system, the structures, and how the players want to play for them, and they get good reputations. And younger players will, and senior players will go, I work with this coach. He's good. And there are shared ideas. It can work. It may not work. There could be pitfalls there. I don't think it's always a negative thing, but I think I can, as I say, I understand why the FA would lean toward Lee Carsley, even if it's only on a 1-year temporary basis if they want to get Guardiola, or a permanent basis. I could see Lee Carsley being an interim for 12 months until Guardiola is available, just to save the FA money. And I think that's unfair on Lee Carsley. I think if he's done that well with the junior setup, and in the background at the FA, at St George's Park, I think he does deserve his little promotion. And I think there's any harm in that. He's also got club coaching experience as well. So it's not as if he's completely out of his depth. But coaching the under-23s and then going to a World Cup is a different kettle of fish. The media is a different kettle of fish, the expectation from the fans. And as I say, coaching the England national side is one of the most difficult jobs in professional or international sport. Bar none. One of the most difficult football, and in any sport for that matter, at any level, international, professional, club level. It's one of those poison chalices potentially. That fly is going to die. I swear. But yeah, Scaloni. But again, Argentina is an interesting one. He's been criticised at times for the style of play and selections that he selects. Deschamps with France has been criticised for some of his selections and style of play. It's called being pragmatic. Winning is not always necessarily beautiful. But I do think it's more about getting the right culture as well can do massive. If you have a positive, united, or nearly, because not everyone's going to get on with everyone in a dressing room, we know this. But if you can get all the players and all the coaches, all the whole backroom staff and the whole organisation going in the same direction in regards to getting to that goal, that fly is going to die. Then yes, you can definitely have take that next step and take a step on the journey. Yes. It does go a long way as building that culture and getting people to buy into the system and the style. This is where we've seen certain players and manager relationships not work. And hence Capello, very successful manager, didn't work with England. A lot of people question why it didn't work. Was it the language barrier? Was it the culture barrier? Well, there were multiple reasons. He didn't solve the club country battle, which Southgate seems to have done. Alf Ramsey did back in the day. Sir Bobby Robson did back in the day. Certain managers managed to solve that club rivalry and represent the national side and getting people to just come together and work together and enjoy each other's company and enjoy working with each other. Other managers just haven't got that balance right. Do I think the recent Euros was the worst for a few years? I didn't think it was as good as Euro 2020 for actual on-field play. Atmosphere was better though, because more fans obviously were in attendance. Some stadiums at the Euros 3 years ago were actually completely empty. Others had fans in. Was it the best I've seen? No. Was it the worst? No. I would say it was about average. I was surprised with the goals per game average dropping off as bad as sharply as it did as the tournament went on. I was with the way the tournament started, with the amount of goals being flying in, and then dropping off a cliff. Was surprised with that. I knew that 4 goals per game after the first weekend could not be sustained. If that was sustained, that would be ridiculous. But I was expecting a high 2.7, 2.8, maybe a low 3.1. It dropped off quite steeply as one of the lowest goals per game average we've seen at Euros in my lifetime. I will say that since Euro 92, it was one of the lower goals per game average. The pitches were not at the standard that we've become used to, but 25, 30 years ago, these were world-class quality pitches. Now they were really getting questioned about the quality. But back in the 90s, if you look at some of the footage of the 90s and even into the early 2000s, top-level European clubs had pitches better than that or worse than that. I think worse than that, and they were classed as top-quality pitches. So the pitch quality was questioned and the preparation of the playing surface was questioned. Now, we have obviously seen in Europe, just here, a very interesting summer and spring into summer. In fact, the last 12 months have actually been excessively wet in the European part of the Northern Hemisphere. People just think it's been wet in the UK. It hasn't. The weather has been a bit bananas for the last 12 months in North Africa and Europe, basically, in that part of the Northern Hemisphere. In the eastern northeastern hemisphere, should we say, or the quarter of that part of the world. And while it's lovely, beautiful weather here in the UK, and where I live, it's been actually quite nice today, a bit warm for me. I do better in dry. It's more humid for me, should I say, not warm, humid. If that was dry heat, I'm out there and I'm working in that and I'm enjoying it. I'll do my gardening. It's too humid for me. I suffer a lot from chest infections and getting ill that way, but that's too humid for me. Really suffer with it. If that was dry heat, I'm stripped to the waist. I'm doing my gardening, not in the live stream. I'm out there, but it's too humid. But the weather here is completely different to Paris. Paris, it's pissing down right now. Germany, with the Euros, a lot of thunderstorms. Very similar to Euro 2008 in Switzerland and Austria. There was a lot of just torrential downpours. And whereas Euro 2006, that was one of the driest summers Europe had seen at that point since the 70s, since 76. And 2003 was quite hot. That was a very hot, dry summer with a lack of rainfall between May and July. Whereas this one, a lot of rainfall between May and July. It's brutal. I find it funny when Americans complain about the humidity in northwestern Europe. Our latitude is higher than New York. In fact, London, I think, is on the same latitude as Toronto, for Christ's sake, or even maybe Quebec or Montreal. Quebec City, that is. People are surprised, actually, when we look at the humidity and where the UK, Paris, Oslo, Stockholm, Berlin, Copenhagen, and major cities in Europe are. The latitude is we're talking north. New York is like Casablanca when it comes to latitude. It really is. It's you have to actually look at the actual latitude and you'll be like, what? New York's that far south? It is. Americans get really surprised when Europeans are complaining about humidity or heat waves. I think what we're going to experience in the next month, I think August is going to be brutal like 2022. I think we are going to see some record temperatures. I think we could hit 40 degrees Celsius range again in the northern half of Europe. I really, really do think that. Partly, I work in these conditions. I work outside 5 days a week. My days off, like Saturdays and Sundays, generally, so far this summer, actually, I've been going for a lot of walks, a lot more walks than what I did in 22 and last year. I've been going a lot of walks on my weekends and days off, and I've booked days off. A lot of walks. I have some great trails around here through the woods and a lot of cycle trails and walking trails. And it's just nice because you're in that shade with the tree canopy. And there's a good breeze. If there's a good breeze going, it's actually quite pleasant. It's just my hay fever just flares up. I need to get some antihistamine. And it's pine pollen on it really affects my airways and my eyes and all that. And I'm surrounded by I've got pine forest behind my flat. I've got a pine forest over there, there's a lot of pine trees lining the avenue down to my local shops. So I'm surrounded by the type of tree that gives me hay fever. And I've run out of antihistamines, and that's a problem. Although I think pine pollen, has died down a bit, so my hay fever hasn't been as bad. But that's the one that really does it for me. But I've been going on a lot more walks, and it's really good. But if the weather gets too hot, no, it's just not happening. And the humidity was brutal. When I had my 2 weeks off when the Euros group stages were on, I actually was going on walks every morning. Every morning I was going on an hour walk. I would go on a long walk, get some vitamin D, just go on a long walk. My Instagram was full of my adventures. Yeah, we'll go on a walk in the morning. There's a lovely, I wouldn't say viewing platform, but there's a lovely trig point where you get good views of huge swathes of the south of England. It's like God's country. You can see Hampshire, Surrey, Sussex, Wiltshire, bits more of Berkshire where I live. You can see a massive panorama of central southern England, basically. And you can see the flight path of Gatwick Airport with international flights going to North America. It's fantastic. You really can just see the planes and you go, it's going to the US or Canada. And then you on a real good day, you can see Salisbury Plain, and it's fantastic. But no, the humidity is brutal right now. I find it funny when Americans complain about it, but then you see how far north Europe actually is in comparison with the lines of latitude and longitude where Europe actually is and where it sits compared to the majority of the US, apart from Alaska. The heat's not the problem. Heat is not the problem at all. But what is very interesting is that why don't you have AC? Because it's expensive. Because the energy ratings, this is where tax comes in. When I go to Costco or an electrical retailer, obviously you get the energy rating on the product. Ironically, the more expensive products which actually have the higher tax or more expensive are the ones with the lower energy rating. And when you walk into Costco, especially in the middle of winter, and it's freezing outside, do you know where I stand for 5 minutes? The electrical section with massive plasma TVs, laptops and computers and tablets, because they're all turned on so you can actually, it says touch me, work it out, have a fiddle with the remote, see how it all works. The heat coming off a plasma TV is ridiculous. There was like a 100-inch home cinema QLED curved Samsung, bloody massive bloody thing. It was huge. It was worth about $6,000, and that's obviously Costco prices. So you imagine what that's worth with going down to, Curry's, PC World, add on up $2,000 onto that. Massive 120-inch bloody home cinema system. Had one of the lowest energy ratings you could get for energy efficiency. It was like an E or an F. It was like horrible. The heat coming off, I just stood there for 5 minutes going, this is actually quite unpleasant. It's -5 outside. It's cold. It's trying to snow. Freezing, icy. This is lovely. I'm going to stand here. I'm going to stand here for 5 minutes. My mum was like, yeah, I think I'll stand here as well. And I was like, do you want to have a new TV for your flat? I don't have a TV license right now. But it was the heat coming off these electrical items. And I'm thinking, it's not energy efficient and they cost more. But on a cold day, go to Costco, stand in the electrical section. Costco Farnborough, by the way, their TV electrical section is right by the front entrance. Get yourself a Costco card, go down or go with a member, stand there for 5 minutes in the middle of winter. It is fantastic. It is like paradise. It's like the summer. It's nice. More than 5 minutes, then you start sweating profusely and then you've got to move. But the rest of the store is freezing because it's air conditioned. Because it's American, so Costco has air conditioning. But no, I find it funny when the Americans complain about heat and humidity. We do get hot temperatures here. It's the humidity. You are no more than, I think, 60 or 70 miles away from the sea. And you're no more than, I think, 3 or 4 miles from a major body of water in the UK. So anywhere there's a major body of water, you're going to have humidity. I've got a lake 25, 30 meters from my flat. It's a small lake, but it's there. And I walk past it every day. It's a private lake. It's a private lake for 2 or 3 houses that have little boat ramps. I think it's artificial, but it's a lake. It is there. I'm within 30 feet of a major body of water. Not massive, but it's still a body of water, and the insects love it. And of course, humidity. And you get all that evaporation on a hot day. It's humid. This is what I think the Great Lakes region feels like in the US. Horrible. Anywhere where you have large bodies of water and you have sunlight, it is horrible. You will get humidity. You get humidity in the desert. Especially if you're near an oasis or near the coast, you will get humidity. You will get humidity in the Mediterranean. So Italy is horrible in the summer. If you don't like humid air, it is horrible, absolutely brutal in the summer. I've been out in the Adriatic. I've been out on the Ligurian coast. I've been out in Sicily on the Mediterranean. It is brutal. You feel it. And our infrastructure we've got some really old buildings. I mean, there are some of the little cottages and old houses near here that are older than the US. Um, the town centre where I live, some of the cottages there go back to Tudor times. There's a house called Tudor House. It has a sandwich shop actually in the ground floor and part of it. I think it's closed now, the sandwich shop, but there is a commercial premises in it. The business rates for that building are ridiculous. That is a house built in the 1560s or something. They only realised how old it was when they were doing a renovation on what they believe was a Jacobean, which is Stuart period, which is 1601, 1602 to 1715. That's classed as the Stuart period of history. They were doing a renovation on the house, in the 1800s, 1900s, taking some of the front of the house off, and then they found the Tudor bits and they were like, oh, this is really old. And so it's now got listed heritage status, can't knock it down, have to be very, very careful how you modify it, all this kind of stuff. That's like a 600-year-old house. There are some cottages opposite that I think could potentially have medieval cores to them, because I've watched enough documentaries and archaeological programs like Time Team to know there are some old houses in my local town centre. They're older than the first Christopher Columbus going to North America by accident. These are old buildings. And again, the infrastructure is just not built for it. And then you look at the transport infrastructure and the mess that we have. Good God. Good God, man. Do I think Paris is handling the Olympics well? I haven't watched enough of it. Reminds me of the school here in Australia. We had a cricket tour. We played against a British school that was as old as King Henry VIII. I think you might find that could be Eton or something like that, or Harrow, one of those public schools. That would probably be the school you played against, being as old as Henry VIII or maybe Henry VI or something. I know Eton was founded when Henry VI was king, which is just before the Wars of the Roses. So we're talking 1430s. I think Eton was founded in 1440s. So the big chapel at Eton is the same age as the chapel at Cambridge, built by the same architect. Fantastic, by the way. Cambridge University, their major chapel in one of the colleges, is built by the same architect who built the chapel at Eton Public School near Windsor. Check it out. Honestly, I used to have my old school carol service at Eton College because of the chapel being huge. It really actually looks like a cathedral inside. It is ridiculous. Is it Cambridge Cathedral? It's a massive. There are some. Yeah, Henry VI, maybe a bit mental, not a very good king, but very religious man. A lot of churches built, a lot of cathedrals upgraded under his reign, even with the instability in the Wars of the Roses. Check out the interior of some of the cathedrals built in the 1430s or upgraded in the 1430s, 1440s, just before the end of the 100 Years' War, in the early to middle bit of Henry VI's reign, when he's not completely gone batshit crazy, but he's on the way to completely mad. The interiors are fantastic. But yeah, there are some sporting rivalries that are old as some, independent nations, current modern day nations. I mean, there was a subscriber left a comment in one of my recent videos after I think one of the last live streams where I was discussing, or one of my videos where I discussed subscriber milestone or something, and I mentioned at the 2,000 subscriber milestone, I've got to wear the Burnley shirt for a live stream as a Blackburn Rovers fan, and I then did a video discussing the history of the rivalry and how, for and against, the head-to-head, the trophy count, the first official game, how far back the rivalry goes, and it predates the foundation of the Football League, which was 1888. I can't remember. I think it was Federation in 1901. Federation in Australia, it's in the 1900s, early 1900s, because Canberra has only been a city since like 1912 or something. The fact that the sporting rivalry between my favourite sports team and our biggest rivals is older than the city of Canberra, something along those lines. I think Canberra's 1912 is the foundation stone, something like that. Do I think Paris is handling the Olympics well? There's been issues with Paris and the Olympics. I'm going to actually message a mate quickly because I think she's my friend Chloe is a friend who I used to work with, and she's a massive F1 fan. She has been watching a lot more of the Olympics than I have. She did watch the opening ceremony, and she was like, "The weather's crap. It's not the best, and they've got the Olympic flag upside down, and they called South Korea North Korea when announcing the nations," which I found funny, by the way. Yes, the issues with the transportation. What made that worse was that the authorities in Paris and the organisers and the local government and the national government, I believe, put a no-fly zone for like a massive, was it 90-kilometre or 90-mile radius, depending on, I think it was mile radius, which I think is about 120-kilometre no-fly zone on Paris and its suburbs, which includes 3 international airports: Beauvais, Orly, and Charles de Gaulle. So I'm going in smallest to biggest. Beauvais is the oldest, but it's the smallest. Orly is obviously was the main airport for Paris for many, many years, and then Charles de Gaulle is now the bigger airport. Basically, Charles de Gaulle is equivalent to London Heathrow. Orly is equivalent to London Gatwick, and Beauvais is equivalent to like London Stansted or London Luton in regards to importance. Maybe London City, I think, would be a good comparison with the amount of traffic handled by that airport. But when you put a no-fly zone in and closed your 3 biggest airports in the Paris metro and the 2 biggest airports in the country, you're going to have transport problems. You're going to be forcing more people onto the trains, the metros, the trams, and also the motorways, the highways, the roads. So when you take out the train network, yeah, you're going to have problems, regardless of the fact that they basically, because the train network going down means that people have been forced to fly into other airports around France or rely on the train transportation to get to France, to then get to Paris, is a problem. It was only the high-speed network. Local and regional networks were running at capacity anyway because of the airport closures. You then create headaches for the suburban commuter trains, the regional and the local like branch lines. It became a nightmare. But it's embarrassing for the French because they said security for this games is our top priority. We're cancelling leave for soldiers and police officers, naval personnel, air force, military personnel, and soldiers had their annual leave cancelled in the Olympics timeframe. But the French know how to protest, don't they? The French know how to give it to the government or anything government related. The French really know how to give the French government the middle finger, basically. They like a good protest. Macron is not overly popular, and not everyone is overly happy with the Olympics being in Paris. Some people feel it should be in a regional city to grow the regional economy. Other people think they shouldn't host it at all. Anytime a city gets the Olympics or a nation gets a major sporting event, there will be those who go, well, the money spent on that could be spent on infrastructure projects, education projects, environmental projects, domestically, whatever, etc., etc., etc. And President Macron is not overly popular in France. There's a lot of social issues in France. Paris has a lot of problems as a city. People go, it's the city of love. It is a lovely city. It's beautiful. Yeah, in like certain areas in the city centre, the tourist traps, the old, what I call Baroque Renaissance buildings and the Napoleonic buildings, like the Arc de Triomphe. And it's actually a shithole of a city. I'm being honest. It's a shithole. It's a shithole. It's like London here. People go, oh, London's got these fantastic sites. It's expensive. It's dirty, crime-ridden. Go to the regional cities and towns. They're far more beautiful. I've been to France a lot. When you get near the Paris metro or that northeastern agglomeration around Calais and Lille, they're shitholes. Crime rates are through the roof. Poverty, unemployment, expensive. The people are rude. Driving is just, you're driving along. The driving standard goes out the window. Same with Italy. Milan, Turin, Rome, Geneva. The driving standard goes out the window. Dirty cities, crazy people, rude people. You go to a provincial little town or a smaller city, or you go into the countryside to a little village and stop for a bite to eat. Friendly people, lovely people, relaxed, more gentle pace of life, more welcoming, and it's completely different. But no, Paris, a lot of social problems in Paris, a lot of social issues in a lot of big cities in France. There's a massive wealth disparity. There's issues with workers' rights, a lot of protests. Trade unions like just going on strike. People think, places like Australia or New Zealand or Canada have issues. Not even touching the US, but I try to keep politics off the channel. But people think, like here in the UK, we've got problems. We do. We've just had an election. I should know. I got bored of the electioneering for 6 weeks. It was painful. Did no content on the other channel surrounding the election, anything like that. there are issues. France, people we like to complain here in the UK about our transport network. I find it funny when Americans, especially on social media, go, "Oh, the UK, great transportation links. The trains are really good." I'm like, "Oh God, you think our trains are good? Do you think our buses are good?" I have to use these quite regularly. They're not. Like my 2 weeks off, and that's one. When I had my 2 weeks off, I watched a lot of the Euros. Didn't watch every game. Didn't watch every game. Didn't watch all the State of Origin games. Minimum. I just went to see some mates for the day, just for the day. I could have stayed the night at my mates. I could have stayed the night. I went one weekend when there were no games on at the end of the group stage, and then I went when I think it was the quarterfinals the following week, and I did stay the night because I just went, no, it was too much hassle just going for the day, rushing around, trying to get home. Because the trains are not being very reliable. And it was a very hot day, and we rushed around, didn't get all done we wanted to do. We just wanted to have a day out, follow one of the hiking trails along the Thames. Couldn't get all we wanted to do done, so I said, well, I'll come the following week. And then because the weather was bad again, we couldn't do what we wanted to do. Actually, so we had to alter our plans. But because I stayed the night on the sofa, because I will sofa crash. And he said, like, stay in the night. We're not going to rush around. We're going to have a bit more of a relaxed weekend, which we did. The weather paid. But then, again, couldn't do anything because the weather decided to go, nah, we're not going to be nice and sunny. I'm going to piss down now. And we're going to have hail and thunder and flooding, which impacted, what we wanted to do the following weekend. But I was using the trains. And both occasions, both weekends, there were cancellations, delays, and disruption. And I find it funny when I'm talking about sport and transport connectivity and the Major League Baseball getting its timings of when the baseball games come to London, when they get played, when in June or July they play them, first pitch, all that kind of thing. I look at it and go, well, I travel on weekends a lot by train. If I want to go do something, be it, go shopping, get some essentials in. If I'm not doing it locally, I will travel by train. If I want to go see friends and do stuff like that, I go by train. If I've got to go, because I don't drive and because I've given up riding two wheels with an engine due to a few accidents and some health issues, I have to use public transport. Even when I was riding, going to London, I only went into London 3 times on my at the time Aprilia, I think, and my Honda. I only went in a couple of times into London. This is before ULEZ, so I didn't actually go into the congestion charge bit, thankfully. Now I would have to pay money. It was just going into London was hectic, not a lot of fun. There was one time I actually got lost. Me and my friend got lost. We ended up in Uxbridge, which was accidental. Took a wrong turn. There was another time I had an engine issue on my old Aprilia, and I had to go to where my friend was working, which was on the edge of London, edge of Buckinghamshire. Took a wrong turn, ended up in Uxbridge. In fact, I ended up quite a bit into Uxbridge, and I was like, I'm nearly in Hayes. If you know your northwest London geography, I was like, shit, I've gone wrong. This is not the road I was looking for. It was just the wrong turning at a roundabout. I literally took the third instead of the second exit. I ended up in Uxbridge. I was like, Christ, I'm on the high street in Uxbridge. I've gone too far, but I couldn't find a place to turn around. So I would get the train. And train tickets are not cheap. It's very expensive. And so when I hear people complaining about why the Challenge Cup, or why I understand why people want the Challenge Cup moved from Wembley or London in general to a more convenient place to play the games, I understand, to play the Challenge Cup final, why they want to move out of London further north. When people complain about the FA Cup semi-finals being played at Wembley, I understand. It is expensive. And I live 36 miles from Hyde Park Corner officially on the old stone mile markers. I People go, oh, people in the south of England got a lot of money. No, it's bloody expensive living where I live, because I live in the M4, M3 corridors, known as the Thames Valley Tech, our version of the Silicon Valley, basically. Because you've got a couple of areas of high technology companies. So you've got the Fens Silicon Valley, and you've got the M4 Silicon Valley. I'm technically classed as living in the M4 Silicon Valley. It is bloody expensive around here. Rental, I mean, there's a reason why I've got a really small studio apartment. There are houses literally round the corner. We're talking three. There's a guy 4 houses down from where I live who's got a Lamborghini. He's got a limited edition Aventador with a limited edition custom paint job. His house is worth well over a couple of million, and he's only 4 buildings down on that road, not that road, because that's the main road and that's the secondary road. He's got a frigging Lamborghini. I have seen Bentleys today. I have seen classic. I think was it a classic Bentley or a classic Jag Mark II? A car from the 1940s, 1950s drove past me on the way back from the shops. I see high-end Mercs, Porsches. There's a guy near me who's got a TVR, which works. He drives it every day, by the way. It's very expensive where I live. People think that the south of England, everyone's got money. I don't. I'm living in what I can only describe as a bedsit. It's a studio apartment, but it's basically a bedsit. And it's very expensive. It's my council tax is real, the killer bar, because I've got my council tax rebate, paid my council tax, got my single person discount. I don't have to worry about council tax. There's council tax here until April next year, but it's expensive. If you add on my utilities on top of my rent actually isn't that bad. But if you add on my utilities, I'm pushing nearly £1,000 a month for a shoebox. For what I'm paying just outside of Greater London is the best way. I'm about 25 miles from the edge of Greater London, 32 miles from the middle of Greater London, something like that. From what I'm paying up north, I would get a 3-4 bed detached house. One of my old neighbours, who became a good friend of mine, moved to Preston. For what he was paying a month, just in rent alone, we're not including council tax, we're not including bills, because even though our bills are included, he got a 3-bed detached house with a garage in Preston for rent. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And I'm on just above minimum wage. My job, I've just had my pay rise. I'm about, 60, 70p above the living wage? It is ridiculous. If I was living in the next borough down, I get London waiting, so my wages would be like £2 an hour higher. It is ridiculous. If I was only 500 metres down the road and my company was based 500 metres down the road, I'm in the next borough, I'm getting paid London waiting. For those that don't know London waiting, if you live in the capital region or something that's statistically covered by being in the London, Greater London and surrounding metro area, you get a thing called London waiting. Because you're under the London statistical greater urban conglomeration, which includes some other towns and cities that are quite big, that aren't actually classed as Greater London. You get your minimum wage is actually higher. Basically, even though it doesn't have to be, you can get paid a lot more because it costs so much to live. People think all of the south of England is really wealthy. It's not. I mean, okay, so there's some. And I know this is a bit more than not sport related, but it does actually impact sport. It does. So I will discuss how much of a pain in the arse it is to watch London Broncos home games at Plough Lane in Wimbledon. I will discuss that in a minute. And transport and costs does come into it. So yes, we've got some £1 million+ houses. I think the house just behind my block of flats, because the road does a V like that. So this is the main road. There's the road junction where like 5 roads come off it. And the road that goes behind where I filmed the communal garden, where my strawberries and my mint are growing, and how the garden looks like a lovely meadow, because it is. The wildlife in my garden is beautiful. The road behind there, that road, some of the houses on there are ridiculous. The main road, they're building like a multi-million-pound mansion on the main road. Then there's a road that I walked when I was going on my morning walks on my 2 weeks off during the Euros. They're building like a £6-7 million mansion just literally half a mile from where I live. Um, and then around the corner is some of the worst housing you will see outside of a major inner city suburb. And we're talking grotty inner city estate or suburb, wherever you live in the world, how you describe really poor quality social housing. And it is a terrible quality. There are houses boarded up that are being knocked down. There are people who are basically refusing to leave because they bought their social housing. And you go from some of the wealthiest houses, like the most expensive houses outside London, to some of the most deprived areas within 2 streets. And where I used to work at the borough local council I used to work for, one of the roads on my bin collection route, my garbage route, doing residential, was like the 3rd most expensive street outside London. There was another one which was like the 9th most expensive street for average property price outside London. On one of my other days' routes, on my overtime route, and then I would go around the corner where our depot was one of the most deprived areas. One of the most deprived areas where our depot was in the south of England. And we had tower blocks within half a mile of our depot, for example. A high rate of drug use, high rate of crime, a high rate of our youth unemployment. And it was just like, well, up the road in the same borough, you have some of the most expensive houses outside central London in the country. And then you have one of the highest rates of youth unemployment and drug use and crime in the south of England within 4 miles of it, 4 or 5 miles. It was ridiculous. People think Windsor's a lovely place. And yes, there are some very, very nice streets in Ascot and Windsor. So you have North Ascot, which is where the racecourse is and all the posh multi-million-pound houses. Then you have South Ascot. South Ascot is one of the most, if you want to get drugs, if you are a drug user or you like recreational Class A drugs or Schedule 1, you go to South Ascot. The amount you will find heroin needles in kids' play parks. You will find crack pipes in people's rubbish, trash, garbage, when you're loading it on the back of the truck and you see all this stuff come out. You will find crack pipes, heroin needles, drug baggies, so cocaine, cannabis. There was one time, and I will say this, that where I work now, on my old route, which I'm not on anymore, one of the houses, we call it the cocaine house, because every month, around pay weekend, you empty on the, I think is it the Tuesday or the Monday they do? Tuesday. So the Tuesday after payday, we'll go and empty their rubbish, their recycling or their, what we call refuse, household. And bags of cocaine and MDMA would fall out of their recycling and rubbish. And it's like, this is an average middle class suburb that around the corner is the working class council, social housing. But this is a middle class. Everyone owns their own house, and it's the house on the corner with the nice Mercedes AMG, and they like putting shit up their nose. It's fun. So yeah, I just find the wealth disparity amazing, absolutely amazing. Near me is some of the most deprived housing you'll find in the country. Squalid conditions, poor quality housing, and then across the railway tracks, literally the wrong side of the tracks, right side of the track. So where I live now, rich houses down there. Across the railway bridge, which is literally 50 metres from my flat, you have the Travellers site, which is not all travellers, by the way, but it's the caravan, it's the trailer park, basically. It is actually called a trailer park. There's 3 sections to it. And then you have the ex-social housing, some of which still is social housing. So you have the Irish and Romani gypsies plus others living on the trailer park. And then you have the houses opposite, which are all ex or current social housing. So there's policies in this country where you can buy your association. You can, if you live there long enough, you can basically buy your council house. And yeah, so million to 10 million price range for houses on that road, and then suddenly you've got squalid trailer park the other side of the railway, out of mine, hide them behind the trees and the big fences. That's the trailer park, and that's literally some of the worst quality housing you'll ever see. Best people in the world, by the way. Lovely. I talk to them. I prefer doing the traveller site than the posh houses. The traveller site, I mean, one of the lads who lives in the traveller site, trailer park, came out and goes, "Have you got your jobs going?" And he goes, and I went, "At the moment, no." And got in a conversation with him, and he was like, "Oh no, no worries, thanks a lot," And you could see that he wanted, humble, down to earth. There's another trailer park that we do where we get every week on a Monday, same day of the week, same time of the day. The husband or the wife come out. We either get coffee or soft drinks every Monday. Every Monday, without fail, they'll come out, have a chat with us. How you doing? Here's your drinks. Do you want a soft drink today? Do you want a coffee? If the wife is giving the drinks, it's always a coffee. If it's the husband, it's soft drinks. Working class people, actually retirees. Another bloke, he has his own company, lives on the trailer park. He goes, "Here you go, lads. Here's I think, was it 10 or 20 quid tip? Bang, there you go. For the crew. Didn't have to. Yeah, we took a little bit of excess for him, which was a bit of building waste, but as it's caravan / traveller site, they're limited with where they can place their bins and their units, and they're not the best at recycling, let's be honest. We lob it all in the back and it goes down the local tip and they can sort it out. But bunged us a little shifty. But then you go up some of the Christmas and Easter when we talk about tips and all that, which is a bin man thing, where locals will like drinks or cash or chocolates. The working class people I find, or the loads with less, I find are more giving than the wealthy ones who are look down your nose at you. It's just a thing I've noticed over doing this job over 5.5 years. Right, back to questions. See, TNT Sports have lost NBA, not coming this season, but Sky will have NBA and women's NBA from next season for 11 years. TNT Sports have also lost the National League and the National League North and South to DAZN. Yeah, but Warner Brothers Discovery have got the Olympic rights for the next 5 games following this one. So it swings and roundabouts, although TNT, formerly known as BT Sport, has always lost money. They overpay for rights and then they can't sustain it. And it's like they lost the FA Cup for so many years to ITV and BBC, and now they get most of the rights back, but they won't be able to sustain it. I'm sorry. I look at their packaging for Discovery Plus online, where you don't need a TV to watch all their programming. I'm sorry, not paying their prices. Not paying it. Sorry. You live 15 minutes walk from the world's largest legal nudist beach. I bet that's interesting on a nice sunny day in state Victoria. I believe it's snowing up in the mountains in Victoria and New South Wales right now in Australia. A lot of heavy snow. You live in a council. If I go out my street, I take a right hand turn. It's mad. It is mad. How you can go from really, depending on where you are in the country or where you are in the world, from like some really nice upmarket, middle to upper class, or housing wise, really affluent neighborhoods or safe neighborhoods, or high quality housing where even if you're working class, it's safe, low crime rates, low drug use, clean around the corner. It's not safe, not well lit, graffiti everywhere, drug use clearly evident, crime rates a lot higher, and the quality of private property or social housing is a lot less, because you can have some really nice social housing neighborhoods that have got low crime rates, high employment, good education, good sporting facilities. And then you go around the corner and you could have a predominantly private housing kind of community but have a higher crime rate. So it's not always social housing that's the problem, or working class areas that's the problem. It could be a variety of reasons, employment levels, all sorts. I was on my local train once in Frankston, Victoria, and people were chucking tinfoil bags of powder across the train. Well, my friend Chloe was on the train yesterday coming back from the supermarket, going to the supermarket where she lives, which is not actually far from where I used to live, my old apartment. She actually lives near where I used to live. And she's used to live in Woking, which is south of where I live now, but she now lives close to where I used to live. And she goes, the train had a interesting wacky smell. I went, and I just came back with the funniest joke. We apologise for the late running of this service. The drivers decided to hotbox the cab. It was on time. But yeah, no, drug use on public transport. Yeah. Nicest person I ever knew at school was the school garbage cleaner. What the janitor kind of, yeah. Yeah, no, that's generally how it works. It is me. I know I've seen actually some photographs of the Southern Alps. Is it the Southern Alps? Great Dividing Range? Based the mountains in state of Victoria in Australia and New South Wales. A lot of snow. It looks like Scandinavia or the Rockies or the Alps here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's snowed heavier than normal. People get surprised that Australia gets snow. It does. There is a saying here in Victoria, pucker in July, for people who go on cadet camps in the pucker penile, one of those like alpine training areas that the Australian military has, and when you go on cadets, you end up there. Honestly, it's weird. It's getting my head around the fact that in the Southern Hemisphere, it is midwinter right now. And I'm so used to, like, when I watch the rugby league or the AFL, the cricket, or whatever, V8 supercars, that Northern Territory, huge swathes of Queensland are in the mid-20s to mid-30s degrees Celsius, and it's high humidity, and it still looks like what you expect Australia to look like. Then you get further down the coast, and you get to the south coast, like South Australia and Victoria and Tasmania and southern New South Wales and bits of Western Australia, and it's snowing or sleeting or heavy rain, and it's really cold. And it's like, it just reminds me of being in southern England. It's where there's shit. People think Australia is hot all year round, and actually they don't realise A, how big the country is, and B, that it has like multiple eco-regions and weather systems and climates. Like Australia is a continent as well as a country. It's huge. Of course, you know that, but a lot of people just see what they see when they hear like Australia. They picture the outback or the bush. They picture Bondi in the height of the Australian summer. They picture Brisbane different, and they don't realise that Tasmania is just like the west coast, like the Cornish coast, or mountainous Wales or the Peak District, where it can have all 4 seasons in a day. Coastal southern New South Wales and Victoria is again like the Peak District, and I would say the Isle of Man a little bit, and maybe Northern Ireland and coastal Wales and coastal Western Scotland, with the way the landscape is and the way the land is, and that kind of. Again, you can have all 4 seasons in a day. People think Australia is outback, bush, poisonous animals, dingoes running around. It's not. A lot of it is actually like coastal Europe or northern Europe, with its climate. Maybe a little bit warmer and not as cold in winter, but it snows in Australia a lot. In parts of Victoria and New South Wales and into southern Australia, there are some reasonably high mountains, and it snows quite a bit. And I've actually seen the footage of this week. It is ridiculous. In rural Victoria, New South Wales, and to bits of southern Australia, they've had like a foot of snow, and it's just like people don't realise it actually snows in Australia a lot. People are stunned when they see footage of like snow, like near Canberra and up in the mountains. It's there are ski resorts in New South Wales and the state of Victoria. People don't realise that you can actually go skiing. Whereas on the coast in Sydney, it can be like 20 degrees, quite pleasant. And then you drive for 2-3 hours, 4 hours, and then you can go to a ski resort. It's like California. People don't realize there are ski resorts in Eastern California in the mountains. You can go surf on the beach in Monterey Bay or wherever, or Santa Clara or Malibu, and then take a 4 or 5 hour drive and go skiing in the afternoon. Do some nighttime skiing under floodlights up in the Sierra Nevadas. It's ridiculous. People don't realise that. It's fantastic. But getting back to transportation and sport. So, before I get sidetracked, now I was looking at getting some London Broncos tickets, going a couple of games, getting some merch. Now, the merchandise for London Broncos is actually pretty affordable. The ticket prices are actually very, very affordable. It's the transport that's going to kill me. And most of their home games take place on Sundays. And that's just a no-go. I look at the engineering works in and out of London. I have to get to Wimbledon. I have to take 3 or 4 trains. It's a no-go. It's just not happening. It's very inconvenient to have it on a Sunday. And if I miss a train, I'm buggered. I'll miss the game. I've been in a science shed that simulated temperature and humidity of Darwin. Couldn't live there. The temperature, yes. The humidity, no. I'm not doing 90 plus humidity 12 months of the year. I just couldn't do it. I have a lot of respect for people that do Darwin and Cape York in the top of Queensland and the top end in the Northern Territory. A lot of thumbs up. brave people. I can understand why alcohol is so popular in Darwin, while they have Mitchell Street, which is just apparently just a kilometre of piss up. And I can understand why people like their lager and spirits and their rum in northern Queensland and the northern part of the Northern Territory. But I look at I couldn't do it either. I have a lot of respect for people, Territorians and Queenslanders who live right at the top of Australia. It is ridiculous. And so anyone who lives like in Townsville, northwards in Australia, thumbs up to you guys, because that humidity is just batshit crazy. Like I don't know how people do it. I don't know how they do it all year round. Even in the dry season or winter, whenever it's cooler, the humidity is still ridiculous. People, again, this is where I love my sport. Love my sport. It's going to be interesting to see how the 2026 Rugby League World Cups works with the games in Papua New Guinea, because I was watching the Pacific Challenge that they did at the end of last year, at the end of last season, and God, the players looked gassed in the games in PNG. They looked gassed. They looked buggered. And that's still technically in the Southern Hemisphere winter, and they looked absolutely buggered. Absolutely buggered. That is, well, technically early spring, but they look buggered. And I remember the 2017 World Cup, where the games played in Port Moresby. I'm sorry, the players over there. There's a reason why the PNG won all their games apart from the quarter final in PNG. The opposition teams were buggered with the humidity. They just couldn't cope with it. Which is why I have concerns about having the 19th team, because it looks very likely that Perth is going to be the 18th team, having an expansion team in PNG and Port Moresby. I believe they're going to have their training camp based in are they going to play games in Cairns in northern Queensland, but have a PNG side. I do have my concerns. Even when I watch North Queensland Cowboys games or Women's State of Origin or NRLW games that are played in Townsville, for example, Queensland. The stadium in Townsville is fantastic, by the way, but you can definitely see the humidity and the heat really impacting those players, especially for the players who play for the Melbourne Storm, Canberra Raiders, or the St George Illawarra Dragons or the New Zealand Warriors, when they're playing away up in Queensland. If they not necessarily magic round or one of the games taken on the road, you can see that some of them are buggered. Brisbane is not too far from there either, so athletes. No, Brisbane's a bit more further south than you realise. Brisbane is a bit more further south. Yes, it is warmer than Sydney and it is more humid than Sydney. But the Olympics, if you remember the 2000 Olympics and the 2003 Rugby Union World Cup, technically we're in the middle of Australia's winter, so a lot more rain, a lot cooler. Brisbane can actually get cold, ironically. So on the coasts, so if there's a cold front coming off the southern Pacific Ocean, you're going to feel it. It's a coastal city with a close coastal Mediterranean subtropical. You can get very cold days in the Mediterranean. You can. I believe it has actually snowed in Brisbane before, or the Great Brisbane area. You can get frosts in Brisbane. So I wouldn't panic too much, but Brisbane is a lot more pleasant than south central New South Wales right now. The weather in Sydney is significantly cooler than the weather in Brisbane, yes, but the humidity is not as high as Townsville and Cairns. Trust me, I watch enough NRL games to know this. I watch Magic Round. I've only missed the last 3-4 weeks worth of games during the Euros period and the Origin period. I've watched basically the last 5-6 years, maybe 7 years. I've only missed maybe 20, 25 NRL games or something. That I haven't either rewatched on replay or watched. I haven't missed a lot of NRL games over the last maybe 30 games in total over the last 7-8 years. Yes, the weather can have an impact, but it's not as bad. I mean, Brisbane home team against Canterbury smashed them. Canterbury, New South Wales team based in Sydney, Broncos based in Brisbane, smashed them. Away, And Canterbury don't have a great away record this season, even though they're in the top 8 and they've got the second best defence. Smash Brisbane. Interesting in Australian sports culture, we don't play games at climates that harm the opposition. No, I mean, I think there's, because of the sporting culture and having fair competition is a big part of Australian sporting culture. Honestly, don't. I mean, they even played a rugby league test match at Mile High Stadium in Denver, so both teams were equally buggered there, weren't they? I think it was England and New Zealand. They played at Mile High Stadium and were both equally buggered. And were like, we're feeling this. But no, that's Australian sporting culture, is to give fair crack to both sides. Give fair crack of the whip to both teams. I personally wouldn't play an international level match in Darwin. I mean, I know the Parramatta Eels take 1 game per season to Darwin. They've done that for a long period of time now. They played the Dolphins this year, got absolutely hammered. Trey Fuller had one of the best games I've ever seen a second string fullback ever have. One of the best tries you'll ever see scored. And you could see the players of both sides were buggered after about 10 minutes. And Parramatta go there every year, and obviously Redcliffe is part of the Brisbane metro area, and you would think, okay, Brisbane, yeah. Both sets of players were buggered. We even in the 80s let the West Indies with 5 pacemen play. I would say, the West Indies between, I would say, 1968 and about 1997 were terrifying, with the best test side in the world in cricket, and they just produced some of the best fast-paced bowlers we've ever seen. Not great at producing spin bowlers, though, the West Indies. I find very interesting, but they just went, okay, we'll get some rather tall blokes to bowl 95-mile-an-hour bounces at your head for 5 days. The West Indies, not renowned for producing spin bowlers, but are renowned for producing some of the best just pace bowlers. And it's scary. Absolutely scary. I can't remember what the record is, but I think the West Indies have the longest unbeaten streak in Test matches and the longest win streak in Test matches of all time. Larry Gomez, but he was decent. He wasn't on a subcontinental Indian or England or Australian level of spinner. He was average. He was solid. He could do a job, but no. When you've got some of the pace attack the West Indies had for about 25 years, there's a reason why I think they were the top ranked Test side for the best part of 2.5 decades. You look at the old footage of the West Indies pace attack back in the day, and this is without proper diet. Like, we have dietitians now. This is without sports scientists. This is without strength and conditioning coaches. This is without, a proper full-time bowling coach. This is without a full-time fitness coach. Back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even into the early 90s, cricket wasn't actually that professional. They were paid players. They weren't as professional as they are now. And Jimmy Anderson, if he was playing back in the day, I don't think his career would have been nearly as long at Test level. But then he might have had a longer career even. But he wouldn't have played as many Test matches and taken as many wickets. His career would have been the same length, but he wouldn't have been selected as many Test matches and many first-class games. But you look at the pace and consistent pace and the brutality, the accuracy, and just the skill. It's just terrifying. Batsmen had longer careers than bowlers, basically. So what Muralitharan, Shane Warne and Anderson, for example, have done on the bowling side of things, a fast bowler would not have had the career that Anderson has had. So the West Indies has had a production line for 25 years of fast bowlers who could bowl an average of about 90 mile an hour over a Test series, 5-match Test series, it was just ridiculous. And you look at that old footage and you look at then what they could do, and then they could have brilliant batsmen. Fielding, not so much. It was the batsmen and the bowlers that won the West Indies all those Test series. They intimidated opponents. Dennis Lilly, probably the famous example of a bowler who nearly ruined body with bad technique, but came back with less pace as a tactical. Yes, but he also came back with some very good bits of sledging. Famous for his sledging as well. absolutely famous for his sledging. So he would intimidate an opponent with pace, and then he would intimidate them with verbals and get up here. And when he was fielding, he would, you know, even when he was batting, he would annoy the opposition bowler to the point that he put them off their game. Wasn't the best batsman in the world, but I've got plenty of cricketing books, so but I don't enjoy cricket as much now as what I did when I was a kid growing up. It's not as enjoyable for me now. So there is that. Okay. So my friend Chloe is popping in and out of the live stream as the F1 and the Olympics, depending on the events that we're in. This response is brilliant. So when people were all, earlier on, I was discussing how like around the corners of the wealthiest houses in the country and some of the poorest areas in the country where I live. Better descriptions than Google Maps is going to give regarding where I live. Yes. She just WhatsApped me that. That's brilliant. Cheeky sod. But no, like, obviously Dennis Lilly is before my time. Well before my time, but and the West Indies at their peak. I mean, I caught the end of the West Indies as the top dogs in cricket, and it was still a privilege watching Brian Lara play and Curtly Ambrose bowl. Honestly, I caught the end of their careers, and they were fantastic. I actually remember Lara's record-breaking 400. Hang on 1 second. Viv Richards is getting average about 65 until he had eye surgery. Well, Viv Richards, or serving Viv Richards, actually, one of the best ambassadors for the sport, one of the greatest players the sport's ever seen. One of the greatest players the sport has ever seen. Absolutely ridiculous. His impact on the game. And that and that West Indian, just when one pace bowler retired, get the next one in, and the production line they had, and the style of play they went with, and the pathways they had. The West Indies changed how you approach Test cricket. Test sides realised in the 90s, okay, very depth orientate batting lineup. You had to have players lower down the order, like the all-rounder, and even the tail end who could bat a bit. Then you actually needed a multi-pronged bowling attack. You needed one spinner of a decent quality, any decent quality, not world-class, but you need one spinner, one medium pacer, and you could alternate, but then 4 or 5 pace bowlers. And you needed to have pace bowling depth. If one of them was injured or unavailable, you could call upon the next guy up who could still do a job for you. You needed a 5-man pace attack, one spinner, one all-rounder, and then the rest you could just. But they also had to be able to bat. Fielding was optional, but you needed to have pace attack and a batting depth. Fielding then became a thing with South Africa and John T. Rhodes. If you could get a team with all three, you get Australia, you get England, you get South Africa in the 90s and the 2000s. Then you get the ultimate Test side. The ultimate Test side comes because of the West Indies dominating for 25 years. The ultimate Test side comes when South Africa are back in international sport. Australia and England realise we've got great pace bowlers. We've got some great all-rounders. We've got some great fielders. Let's select all three and get a real solid. But there's one thing that, regardless of how bad England and Australia were at times, and South Africa when they were at, they had great wicket keepers. And great wicket-keeper batsmen. But they never had them at the same time. They had great bowlers and great fielders and great batsmen. Getting them all together suddenly happened in a very short window. in the late 90s to the mid 2000s, England, Australia, and South Africa, the big three, suddenly had all of that in one go, and they became the sides that they became. Now every side needs to have batting, bowling, fielding, and wicket-keeping. I would say John T. Rhodes is better than Ricky Ponting. John T. Rhodes is the prototype cricketing fielder you need. What we see now with the IPL and T20 and all the other T20 competitions and international T20, fielding and one-day cricket has positively impacted Test cricket. But John T. Rhodes, which is the reason why that's one of my nicknames, John T. Because when I was a kid, he was at his peak of his powers. South Africa are allowed back into international sport. And as a kid, I had quite long curly hair. John T. Rhodes had a bit of a mullet at the time. And I had the John T. Rhodes mullet as a kid naturally. It just grew naturally. When my hair is long, I look like I go out in the sun and I keep it at a certain length and I trim it in a certain way. I look like John T. Rhodes. Just make my hair lighter. I have the haircut. And as a kid, I used to run around and try and catch everything and throw myself into moving objects. And I was a bit of a crazy ADHD child. So my mum just nicknamed me John T. Rhodes. And so that nickname has stuck with a family nickname that I continue to have is John T. Because of John T. Rhodes, the South African, by far one of the best fielders ever. Pretty good cricketer with a bat as well, but as a fielder, ridiculous. Yeah, I'm not surprised that England have beaten West Indies. I've got to do a Jimmy Anderson career video, and then I have to do a couple of other career videos for certain players. I've done Andy Murray retirement video, and I've covered all his stats in that. Rafa Nadal, I've got to do a video on him when he decides to finally hang up the racket. I've got to do a Rob Borrow video as well. There's a lot of a to-do list. There's a bit of a to-do list. But England winning my team, I'm not surprised. West Indies are not the team they were. This was 25 years ago. I would be shocked by that test result. I would be by that series result, but I'm not surprised England have won the series. Really not surprised by that result at all. As I say, the West Indies are not the test side that they were 25 years ago. They were still the best side in the world 25, 30 years ago. And as I say, very fortunate to see the end of Ambrose and Lara, see the end of their careers. But I basically had the privilege of watching Brian Lara at Test level for 10 years. I was there for Jimmy Anderson's first Test wicket at Lords again, where he takes Vermeulen of Zimbabwe. I was there, I think, for the Jimmy Anderson's first 10 Test wickets on day 3 of the first Test against Zimbabwe in 2 innings. Yeah, I think he got 2-5. If I remember, he took 10 wickets in total in the first Test against the West Zimbabwe. 2003, Maybank holiday weekend. I seem to remember it very, very well because it was my first ever cricket test match. And it happened to be at Lords, the oldest cricket stadium in the world, and possibly the best, alongside the MCG. So bucket list stadium done when I'm the age of 13. There you go. 21 years ago. And I do remember Jimmy Anderson's first test because I was there. I watched his first ever ball bowled. I think he took Vermeulen in his second over. Was it the second over, the third over of the test, second over of play? I seem to remember Jimmy Anderson opened the bowling on day 3 against Zimbabwe because I watched days 1 and 2 on the TV, and I went for day 3, and I think I missed the last 2 wickets or the last wicket. We had to leave a little bit early to beat the rush, but you don't like the current MCG layout. There are some people who question some refurbs of stadiums and how certain stadiums are built and the view angles and how close you feel to the action, how you view. There are certain. I mean, look, I was sat in the Edrich stand, which is the bottom tier of the Edrich stand, which is the stand. If you look at, there's the Lords Media Centre like that. It's down there. I didn't have the best view. I was at a weird angle to the wicket and the crease. And the wicket at Lords. If I was sat in the second tier or the pavilion or certain different bits of Lords, I would have probably got a better view of the action when I was. But I was a lot younger, and I just enjoyed the occasion. But yeah, people can be critical of like the MCG or the Sydney Cricket Ground or the Gabba or what's the current stadium in Perth? Is it the Wacker Oval? or whatever they call Perth's new test ground. I believe the WACA's closed now or being demolished. Certain stadium rebuilds people don't like. They say it loses a bit of the atmosphere, or the view lines aren't great, the sight lines aren't great, get too far from the action, or the seating's too steep, or the atmosphere doesn't work. You can criticise. People can criticise a stadium. It doesn't make you unafraid. Yeah, I know they've moved out the WACA, so it's the Optus Oval. Right. Yeah, look, my bucket list, obviously I need a passport to complete my bucket list of sporting, not just stadiums, but sporting museums and attractions, things that are linked, halls of fame, for example, sporting museums. I would need a passport to tick off my bucket list. I've got to update that as well. So I've got to do a video of talking about the sports teams I support, a 2024 edition, because I think I last did that in 2018, and bucket list stadiums and arenas, a 2024 edition, because I last did that in 2018, 2019. So there's some video ideas of like, where I would need a passport to go to some of the stadiums and arenas that I want to, watch sport in. Yeah, the Melbourne Cricket Ground is one of them. I want to watch an AFL final at the MCG rather than a cricket test match. There you go. That makes me a bit weird. I want to watch Aussie rules at the MCG rather than a Australian England Ashes test. Don't ask me why. I just want to see from because cricket. I've been to a test match. I've been to an iconic stadium, Lords. I know how it goes. To watch an AFL Grand Final at the MCG, that's different. It's a different fan base that goes in there, different crowd. It's a different atmosphere. It's completely different than a cricket crowd, I would have thought. And you just can't. I mean, you can watch a test match in, the MCG, Sydney Cricket Ground, Lords, the Oval, the Gabba. I'm just naming. What's the one in Cape Town? Various other test grounds around, cricket test grounds around the world. But the AFL Grand Final is only played in one place, and that's the MCG. AFL is only played in one country in the world, Australia. So that would be, for me, where I would definitely, that'd be on my bucket list. But again, that is something. 100,000 people watching. I mean, it's like the FA Cup final at Wembley. That is, while Wembley has hosted rugby league and rugby union and internationals and other cup finals like the League Cup and the FA Vase and the FA Trophy and things like that, and the EFL Trophy and various other cup finals, playoff finals. The FA Cup being played at Wembley is iconic, and it's 101 years since the first FA Cup final at Wembley. 101 years since the White Horse final. And I've got to do a video on the history of Wembley Stadium, because obviously there's that period where it doesn't exist, where it's being rebuilt, and why Wembley Stadium was chosen to be where it is, which was at the time, I believe, was it Buckinghamshire? It was in the arse end of nowhere. It wasn't actually in what is now Greater London. It was in a field. They went, we're going to build a stadium here. Stadium in the arse end of nowhere, outside of London, in the countryside, and build a railway station right next to it, because there was a main line that goes. I believe it's Is it King's Cross or Euston? I can't remember which stadium. Where Wembley, which main line out of London, which major terminus. But there's a main line. We're going to build a stadium here. And then, obviously, the rest is history. The first FA Cup final is the famous White Horse final with that police horse, where there's the pitch invasion. I think Bolton Wanderers were playing that day against... Is it Wolves? I have a funny feeling it's Wolverhampton Wanderers. But Bolton was it West Ham? Bolton were playing someone, and I think Bolton win. I believe, but that's the first final in 1923, and then there's 6 years where Wembley doesn't exist because it's a building site, and the 2 towers at Wembley were meant to be going to Exeter City, St James's Park, not St James's Park in Newcastle. That then falls through, and then they don't incorporate the 2 white towers, which they should have done in the new build. That's like they've done with the MCG, or like they've done with Lords with the old or the Oval, for example, with the pavilion. They've incorporated the old with the new. Sydney Cricket Ground is a great one where they've got the pavilion stand and the old pavilion, and they've incorporated it into the modern, cricket stadium that you have in Sydney, for example. They've done a lot of work there, a lot of improvements, and you've got the modern and the old, and they've incorporated the traditional with the new. That's one of the criticisms I have of the current Wembley, is they didn't keep the 2 white towers. When my family was in England, we lived in a flat in Liverpool right next to a football ground, Marine FC. I'm not sure who the team was. Marine FC. I think I know the team you're talking about. I believe they played Tottenham in an FA Cup game when Gareth Bale was back on loan from Real Madrid, and that match review is on the channel. I know exactly which team you're talking about. It's a non-league club, and Marine is actually their name, and they actually do play in Merseyside. People forget there's actually 3 professional clubs, football clubs in Merseyside, or is it 4? Is it Stockport? No, Stockport's in Great Manchester. What's the bloody... it's going to annoy me now. Southport. There's 4 professional clubs, should I say, in Merseyside. Not 3. People forget that Tranmere and Southport are also technically in Merseyside. They're professional clubs, and Tranmere is obviously in the Football League, and Southport have been in the Football League, and of course you've got Liverpool and Everton. People forget about that. A lot of people who don't know the history of Everton and Liverpool, who aren't hardcore fans, are surprised to know that Everton used to be the owners of Anfield. Then there was a dispute, which meant they went to Goodison, and Liverpool gets set up in 1891 and now become the tenants of Anfield. And Goodison Park was the replacement stadium for Anfield that Everton built, and they found a tenant, which was Liverpool, and there was tax issues and money issues, and so Liverpool actually initially rented Anfield from Everton. He went, here's a stadium. And then they sold them the stadium for not a lot of money. It was not a lot of money. That's how Liverpool came to be. There was a dispute over, was it a freehold or a leasehold? And Everton wanted to build a new stadium, which was Goodison. They couldn't find a tenant for Goodison, so they moved into Goodison. They needed to find a tenant for Anfield, which became Liverpool. And then they sold Liverpool the stadium for £5, 10 shillings or something, or ridiculous, which in real money which would equivalent to about £200,000 today. Something weird like that. I have to look back at the history videos of Everton and Liverpool Football Club, which I did a couple of years ago. But basically, Everton, formerly known as San Domingo FC, were the original team that played at Anfield. So there you go. And Everton were founders of the Football League. So Everton are the oldest club in Merseyside. Let that sink in. We got there in the end, but there's a story behind that. So I think it is a shame they are leaving Goodison and moving on to the stadium in the Docks, which has been controversial. But it's Everton's 3rd official home. So there we go. Whereas Liverpool have only ever played at Anfield. Ironically, Manchester United's highest ever home crowd is not at Old Trafford, it's at the Old Main Road. Because for a few seasons after World War II, Man United had to play at Main Road because Old Trafford got hit by German bombers in the Blitz. Another one for you. So yeah, there's some fun fact. So this is where I say to new viewers, just check out the club histories I've done. Check out some of the history videos, because you'll be stunned at a lot of, especially from North America, especially from the US. I think sports fans from the US who are getting into rugby union, rugby league, and association football, especially association football, but the other team sports as well, are absolutely stunned by how old the majority of our professional sports teams are, their origin stories, the histories of the grounds, the histories of the clubs, the highest attendances these teams have had, the records, the amount of appearances players have had, some of the history. They're surprised that there was football before the Premier League existed in 1992. They're like, this club is how old? Like this club has won how many trophies? Like they are just completely and utterly blown away by like how far. Like, to put it this way, I know that I have viewers from the US and Canada who may support a Football League or Premier League side or a European side, partly because of they just watch the Champions League, Europa Conference League, or they just catch the occasion. They go to a sports bar and they catch the occasional league game with the North American commentary team on Sportsnet, TSN, or NBC, or whatever the ESPN or whatever the carrier is. And they go, I like the color of the team's kit, or I like, or my grandparents were from that city, or one of my parents was based over there, and whatever their connection is, and they go, I'll support that team, I'll follow that team, and they're still surprised when they hear about, the history and the foundation story, and I get some good, but I've got viewers all from all around the world. Like when I do some of the foreign leagues across Europe, I've got Portuguese subscribers and viewers. After I did Boa Vista and Porto, and I think I did Braga as well. I've got viewers all across Europe, like Germany and Switzerland and Austria. I think I've done one or two Austrian clubs. I've got to look at my Austrian clubs. Italy, I've got a lot of viewers from Italy. France, even though I've only done a handful of French clubs, but I do have French viewers and subscribers, more to do with my rugby league and rugby union videos, but I do have French viewers and subs. And there's a lot of North American viewers to this channel. They're stunned by just how old some of our sports teams are and how old some of the clubs are and stadiums, and and I've still got a lot of clubs to cover, even in the English non-league and the lower leagues in Scotland. Oh my God, some of the clubs I've got to cover in the lower leagues in Scotland and the non-league in England, they'll be like, how old's this team? How long have they been? Like there are some English football clubs that are older than cities in like Nevada and California and Arizona and New Mexico. There are some cities in Nevada and California that weren't settled till like the 1930s, 1940s. And we're talking anything that's incorporated. So the population could be really, really small, but the football club is actually older than the house or the community that people live in. Like there was nothing there before. And I think if you watch Bill and Ted, they obviously come from San Dimas, which is an incorporated city, I think, in San Bernardino County. It's part of the LA Metro, but it is its own city on its own. That wasn't incorporated until the 1960s. There was nothing there. Project Gutenberg has a book on the history of Scottish football. The video of the two villages, old school village, where they got to get the football across the town, and I think you get a pie or something. The winning team, or the winner gets, then you got the cheese roll. But no, like I say, the origins of rugby league and rugby union. I mean, rugby league obviously set up in 1895. The rules that we see today, and the fact it's a 13-a-side game today, obviously weren't back in the day. It took a while for what we now call rugby league to be called rugby league and the rules to evolve. And the game we see today is different to the game they were playing in 1895. Same with rugby union. The game we see today is, again, different to what was played pre-1895. Same with football. You look at the markings on the pitch. The pitch dimensions of football, rugby union, rugby league are actually all really almost the average, pitch dimensions on width. Not necessarily length, but width. The pitch sizes are so close together. How long do you think the 100 format of cricket will for? Not long. I don't think it will survive. No other domestic governing body has used 100 format. It's not actually growing the fan base at all. And I don't know what the view figures are like, but I'm assuming they're pretty crap. Look, the 100 format to me just doesn't work. T10 works. So, like, if you want to have a shorter format of the game, T10. Or a 12-over game like T12. Just a shorter format of 220. That can work. The 100 doesn't work. Like, you need 6 ball overs, and the way they do it is ridiculous. Apparently it's going to help, like, you know, and the way they try to pitch it to housewives and kids. But here's the thing, you're putting it behind a paywall and kids can't pay for that. Households can't afford that. Limited games on free-to-air TV, buried on the iPlayer. People are not paying the TV license. People just don't have the disposable income. And they're trying to aim it at housewives, you know, single mothers and housewives and families. T20 does that if marketed properly. Sport can do that if you have enough free-to-air access or online streaming access that is free, so YouTube, which a lot of sports are going down the YouTube route now, free and accessible. You can then, like IMSA, the motor racing now, a lot of people don't follow endurance motor racing. I'm a massive fan. They've decided to put their races on live stream on YouTube, as well as their free IMSA TV outside of the US. They've realized, actually, people in the comments section on like YouTube race replays are saying, can we actually have this live? They experimented, I think, with, was it Sebring? Not Daytona, but Sebring, because it was a 12-hour race. The viewership figures were higher than their overseas TV viewership. Their viewership went through the roof because it was free access. Didn't have to pay for it. They were like, crap, we've reached a wider audience. And if people do miss the race, it's up there and it's just in full, ad-free. They might get the YouTube ads, but it's accessible. We've reached a wider audience. The viewership figures are through the roof. The engagement has gone up. So the ECB, I mean, look, this is an organisation that has screwed up for short-term financial gain, has harmed the sport, and the participation levels and viewership is less now than what it was in 2005 when the paywall-only option for TV was signed. When they signed that deal with Sky following the day, literally the day after the 2005 Ashes ended, they put pen to paper for the new TV contract for the following domestic test series year in 2006. The day after, honestly, the day after England win the 2005 Ashes at the Oval on day 5, with only a handful of balls left, they win it. And they go to Downing Street the next day. The day they go to Downing Street, and admittedly, Freddie Flintoff is doing the whole tie thing because he's absolutely, him and KP are completely legless. They meet the Prime Minister, they go to Downing Street. That, when they're in Downing Street, the ECB bigwigs on the commercial are signing the TV contract. The following day, and I remember this quite vividly, the mainstream, it was front page, not back page. This was front page. This was the biggest news story of the day. I forget when it was in September, but it was the biggest news story of the day in 2005 in September. It was the front page. Every major, even the Financial Times had it on there, had a column on, you know, early on in the newspaper, the first couple of pages. That was the biggest blunder that the ECB ever made. They have been making blunders since then. 4 years ago, cap in hand to the government, give us money. And you have to ask the question of the ECB over the last 19 years. Yeah, 19 years ago, they signed that TV deal in September. You have to ask the question, where's the money gone? Because the viewership figures were every year from about 1994, 95 till 2005. There was a decade of just viewership figures staying high, and then they go through the roof. The engagement from about 2001 to 2005, England are on an upward trajectory. Australia are the best side in the world. England are just beating a very good West Indies side at the end of their period of dominance, at the end of the 90s. England go through this transformational period. They find Michael Vaughan, Mark Butcher, Ram Prakash. They've got some good upper order batsmen. We unearthed Darren Goff. We unearthed, Dominic Cork. You've got Ashley Giles as a world-class spinner for a couple of years. Freddie Flintoff, Steve Harmison. You have some Jimmy Anderson's part of this. Jimmy Anderson's only just retired. So you have all these players, gifted players, coming through at the same time, come together. Late 90s, early 2000s, we're unearthing these young talents like Jimmy Anderson. And we've now got, Hoggard, Harmison, Flintoff, Cork, Goff, suddenly becoming our middle to lower order batting lineup and bowling pace attack. Pretty good players. Suddenly we've got a scary bowling attack, scary batting lineup, and we've got a couple of all-rounders like Collingwood and Flintoff. Collingwood could just pull off some stupid fielding, and Flintoff could be the man of the match, man over a 5-day test on a 5-test series, be the man of the series, man of the match, every bloody game. If he focused on his fitness, knocked the drink on the head, he could have been a superstar. Instead, in 2007, he falls off a pedalo, and then his career goes a little bit all over the place. But we suddenly unearthed brilliant players, engagements through the roof, and during that Ashes series, the Trent Bridge Ashes series test, 2005, which is the turning point in the test series, and it was the highest ever viewership cricket ever had. That's the moment where ECB goes, let's get greedy. Fast forward to now, where's all the money gone? Where's the participation? Where's the viewership figures? Cricket World Cup final was the only free-to-air match we had in 2019. The peak viewership was well below the Trent Bridge, day 3 at Trent Bridge. In fact, the average viewership of that Ashes series, apart from the first test, which was a disaster, it was very clear early on we're not going to win at Lords in the first test against Australia. The average viewership, however, when we win the Trent Bridge test, it stayed high. And that whole Ashes series, and in fact, from every test series from I think 99 until that Ashes series, the average viewership had climbed, was actually still higher than what we got for the World Cup final, England, New Zealand, 2019. Massive drop off. And we're talking casual fans, non-cricket fans, just watching 5 minutes of the match. Peak viewership was like 15.7 million. Cricket, we're peaking at around 22 million. Highest peak was about 28.6, 28.7 under Nielsen ratings, all the data they collect. And that's not including those watching at pubs. So about half the UK was watching cricket. 2/3 of England was watching the test side play, and about a third of Wales. So we're talking a huge chunk of the population, even fans in Scotland and Northern Ireland probably were watching. The peak viewership, well, average viewership is non-existent. Peak viewership of that World Cup final was 15.6. We've lost 10 million average, or thereabouts, of casual viewers. That's 10 million. Yeah, there's a reason for that. You've put it behind a fucking paywall. Younger kids now, if you were to ask an average teenager in the street to name England's starting 11 for the first test against the West Indies, excluding Joe Root, Jimmy Anderson, and not Bairstow. Oh God, I've forgotten Ben Stokes. Excluding those 3 players, name the start. You couldn't. I pretty much named the starting line. I mean, I could go for Christothic, Vaughan. I think was Ramprakash or was Collingwood. I think Ramprakash wasn't part of the 2005 Ashes, but Mark Ramprakash pretty much was a mainstay for a little while. We've got Mark Butcher. You had Harmison, Hoggard, Giles, Flintoff. Darren Goff, was he part of 2005? Alex Tudor was in there for a period. Jimmy Anderson started his test career at this point. We've got KP. Was it Geraint Jones who replaced Alex Stewart at this point? Andrew Strauss. I pretty much named the majority of the England lineup for Trent Bridge. Now, handful of players. If you were to ask a teenager, or a teenager, 14, 15, 16 years old, I was 16 that year of the Ashes. I was 16 a few months after the Ashes 2005 series. So I was 15 and a half at the time. If you were to ask a 15 or 16, 17-year-old teenager now doing their GCSEs or A-levels in this country, 18, 19, ask them to name, just a casual average, ask them to name the England lineup. And we're talking, if you've got every teenager in the country, and we're like, right, here's a survey, can you name the England test side? How many of them would say, A, are you a cricket fan? No. So those who are not cricket fans, to name the England cricket test side right now, taking out Ben Stokes, Joe Root, Jimmy Anderson, although Jimmy Anderson's now retired, taking those three players out, name the test side, how many players would they name? That is the audience they've lost a generation of fans because of that TV deal. So yeah, the 100 is a reaction to that, going, oh, we're losing fans, because they're reacting to a bad mistake. Short-term gain for long-term what? Because where's the money gone? And where all the fans gone? Oh yeah, they're not interested because you put it behind a paywall. So poorer families are put off. There are those who don't like the Murdoch media. They're not going to watch. There are those who don't like Sky. They're not going to pay. They're not going to watch. They might like the other pay-per-view sports channels or subscription sports channels. They're not going to pay for Sky. They'll pay for cable or satellite. They will pay for cable. There'll be those who don't believe in the TV license, whatever. But there'll be those who don't like for whatever reason. There'll be those who boycott for reasons, and that's fine. There'll be those that don't have subscription TV. One, I think, is it half the households or something in this country don't pay for subscription sports, legally or otherwise. We just choose not to or can't afford to. It's a con, right? So there's various surveys that prove this. You're pricing out viewers, and there are those who just don't have subscription sport for a variety of reasons, economic or personal or otherwise. A handful of one-day internationals, women's and men's, since 2019. We've had about 9 free-to-air cricket matches since 2005. Yeah, that's not gonna grow the sport. There's a reason why 8 people have died. So older fans have passed away, and younger fans aren't watching. Casual fans are lost interest because it's not in the public view for 6 months of the year. It's just not there. From March, April till September, that's just not in the public consciousness. So the fact that the 2005 series was also free to wear in Australia, I find very surprising. I find that very surprising that Cricket Australia signed that agreement. I don't know what channel it would be on, 7, 10 or 9. I don't know what network, but the fact that Cricket Australia was smart enough to go, actually, we've got a very good England side and a very good Australia side right now. They're about equal. Let's get a free-to-air. Because the last Ashes series, this is when the Ashes was every 4 years. This is when the Ashes, was it still every 4 years? Or was it still every 2? I think they do the Ashes far too. Every 2 years. Does it? They've gone overkill now. But at that time, England were on the up. Australia were the top dogs. England were massively improving, going up the Test rankings, going on this from about 2003 onwards. England were going on this long win percentage where they were winning more than they were losing. They were winning tests overseas, winning Test series overseas, and then I think Cricket Australia was one of the few commercial decisions they've got right as well. And after that, the ICC's, international cricket, it's the governance side of the sport is too India focused. England and Australia, and to a certain extent South Africa, get huge benefits when it comes to revenue sharing with international Test series and one day and the TV rights. We've discussed cricket governance before. It is a cartel. I've watched documentaries, looking at how international cricket governance works, and the fact that India gets about 40% of all media revenues go to India. About that. And then England and Australia get a fair chunk to share between them, and then South Africa coming behind that, then New Zealand. It's not a very balanced, equal share of the pie for all the Test playing nations and the West Indies. It's not. which is why the West Indies has declined as a test side, because all their players now are going, we need to get paid. We're talented enough, and they go play in the T20 competitions, which mean they can't. It will clash with test commitments. They play a couple of good test series, look really good. T20 organisation goes, we'll have you, IPL or Big Bash or whatever the T20 competition is, and then they go on the T20 circuit, and the test side suffers as a result. And it's to do with how the ICC is structured and the governance aspect of it, and how the revenues that cricket makes is distributed. It just does not work. But how long does the ECB continue with the 100 format? I don't know. I think it's 2028 or something. They've committed to a deal with Sky and the BBC, but I don't know. Is it making them money? Really? Are people actually watching it? Is it actually good for the game? I mean, I don't hear a lot of people, most of my work colleagues are more, into their F1, MotoGP and football. So when it comes to it, when we're on break or, in the depot, most of the conversation is football, F1, maybe a bit of rugby union. That's about it. Cricket is not a sport that is widely discussed with my work colleagues. Yes, we do have one of our managers is a member of a cricket club. He does play a bit of cricket. He is a massive cricket fan. But for the most part, it's not the main sport. It's just not discussed on the same level as I think it would have been 20 years ago. And as someone who obviously has been to Lords, has watched a lot of cricket, played it, I just don't think it has the same relationship with younger people and sports fans in general. I just don't think it has the same connection. And I do think putting it behind a paywall for the best part of 2 decades probably had a big part to play with that. The 100, no. I don't think that format. I think if they persist with it, the fact they admitted even before the COVID pandemic it was not going to break even for a couple of years, was actually going to lose them money. They predicted it was going to lose them money, and then COVID hits and they're losing money anyway, and they've got massive deficits. Tells you all you need to know about the governance side of the game, the commercial decisions the ECB has taken. And you see it all the time on social media, on what is now known as X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. People going, viewership figures of cricket are down. It's like, well, you took it off free-to-air coverage, you greedy bastards. It's a general theme you get, is that those who do have fond memories of as kids or teenagers watching England, Australia in the Ashes, or England, West Indies, or England, New Zealand, England, South Africa, all these test series in the 90s and 2000s were like, this is great. And then it gets taken away. And they're like, well, you took it away. It's the same with the Champions League going fully behind the paywall for the last decade. And then you got Florentino Perez going, young people aren't as engaged with football anymore. It's because you put it behind a paywall. Your greed put it behind a paywall. And then we find out your club's basically bankrupt and you're corrupt. And then you're wondering why people are tuning out and feeling less of a connection with the sport that we grew up loving, is because you put too many games behind a paywall. And we were told that, the TV deal and the amount of live games wouldn't harm attendance and ticket prices would be low and affordable. And then the players are paid, what was an average player's salary in a year in a week. So at the beginning of the live stream, I looked at how much an average player was paid in Division 1 in the 89-90 season compared to the average wage of a worker in the 89-90 season. So the average wage, I think, was just under 15 or just around £15,000 a year in 1989-1990. And the average wage for a player was around, I think, £45,000 a year. So about 3 times what the average worker earned, which is not a bad return. Short career, you get paid a little bit extra to compensate you for that short career in case injury ends your career early. So you get that little bit of compensation, but you're not overly paid because you're just paid 3 or 4 times as much as the average worker per year. So we're talking £45,000 per year. Average salary is about 15 grand per year. Now, there's going to be distortions, because regional distortions, and we've discussed before, I live in the southeast of England. Everyone thinks people in the southeast are all wealthy and will have loads of money. Don't. I'm actually getting paid less than the average salary per year in the UK, but I'm above the minimum wage. There we go. But living costs down here are extortionate compared to the Midlands and the north of England and Scotland. It's a lot cheaper. If I was getting paid the same amount of money for my job that I was up north, I'll be living like a king. I literally would be able to afford like a 3-bed. If for the equivalent property, I'll be looking at like a couple of £100 per month for a studio flat this size. Let's say in a small town in Lancashire or a small town in Yorkshire, doing the job that I do. With my salary, I could happily, rather than paying nearly, I think, what am I paying a month? If I was to include council tax and TV license, although my council tax is paid for the year, I'm paying over £1,000 a month on rent and bills. That's not including my internet and my phone. My annual wage a month is £1,700. Now I've got my pay rise, but with my expenditure, we're looking at about £1,200. So I have like £400-500 a month to buy food, drink, and then occasionally buy a luxury item. So clothing, a day out, getting a takeaway. My actual disposable income is not a lot. There are some months where I can't even make disposable. So I've got to pay off my overdraft. So for the next 2 months, I'm not going out. So this paycheck, I might go out once. Next paycheck, probably I have a week off, might not go out. September's paycheck, I might actually buy some nice stuff. I might actually be able to afford to treat myself. So yeah, I don't have a lot of disposable income, if any. I'm in the overdraft. That's fact. For basically 90% of the month, I'm in the overdraft. It's just fact. The closer to the first I get paid, if I get paid, payday's maybe the 28th. If the 28th falls on a Friday, I'm generally just in the overdraft after the first. I got paid on the 26th this month. I'm a bit more into the overdraft than I want to be, although I'm not as far into the overdraft as I could be. So I might actually be all right for next paycheck. I might actually have a fair bit of cash and actually might have some disposable income for the first time in 3 years. There's only been, I think, 1 or 2 months in the last 3 years that I haven't been in the overdraft at the end of the following from paycheck to paycheck. It's been like 3 months in 3 years where I've not been in my overdraft or maxed. And so when we're talking about accessibility to sport and how much things cost, yeah, at the moment, while I would love to go and see the London Broncos play every home game or get a season ticket or go to 4 or 5 games a season, maybe catch the odd Blackburn away game against who I don't have a clue. QPR, I think, would be QPR or Portsmouth may be the chance I get to see Blackburn play away this coming season, as they'll be the 2 closest, easiest grounds to get to from where I live. And I'm not joking on that. QPR and maybe Watford as well, Vicarage Road. But that's still multiple trains and using public transport and a very early start. And then potentially, if they were allowed the away fans out, if I was allowed to go to the exit and file out the stadium as the away fan, yeah, potentially I could go. But again, that's 3 games. It's not a lot. Maybe Millwall if I'm brave. Going to the New Den, maybe 4 away games. That's not a lot. Oxford, 5. I could potentially go 5 away games next season. 5, if I'm lucky. And that's if tickets don't sell. If they don't sell out the allocation, I could potentially get a ticket. Potentially. Because Reading have now been relegated to League One, potentially. And if a cup game comes along, tickets disappear like that, allocations go. So it's not great. It isn't. And while I live close to a lot, like I live up the road from Reading, I could definitely get the train to Reading, Reading Medeski, no problem. They've got a new train station right by what was the Select Car Leasing Stadium, but Reading Stadium. They've got the new train station in the west of Reading, which is a 5-minute walk from the stadium, something like that. I could potentially go see some Reading games, yeah. But again, Would I be able to go every home game? No. Would I be able to afford a season ticket? Can't justify that. Cannot justify the spend. It's a luxury item, and while I would love to go to as many, do I go to the ice hockey anymore? Haven't been for best part nearly 5 years this year. 5 years. I don't live that far from Guildford, so I could go to the Spectrum watch an Elite League game. But again, it's not the game itself; it's the transport. I live on the direct train line, but after a certain time, there's like 3 hours between trains that stop at my local station. I have to go to the next station up, which is further away to walk to, ironically. And while I live on the direct line, the nearest station to me, there's a period in the evenings where there's not a train for 3 hours stopping. So if I miss a train, I'm buggered. And on weekends, engineering works, have fun with that. Honestly, have fun with that. But I could catch a game at Guildford Spectrum in the Elite League, watching the Guildford Flames play, which would be weird because my team, the Bees, big rivals historically. Now they're playing in two different leagues, but for most of their team's existence, they played in the same league, and the rivalry there was brutal. And I remember many occasions where Guildford fans would come to the Bees up in Bracknell back in the day. Now Slough with the Guildford Phoenix, but Guildford fans would have to hide the fact they were a Guildford fan. If you've got those decal stickers you stick on your car, or the little flags you can stick on, or little hanging jerseys. Yeah, if you were seen to have a Guildford Flames decal on your window or on your bumper, your car got vandalised. Like bits of your car you'd get back to your car and the wing mirrors are missing and the aerial's gone and my windows have been smashed. My car's been keyed. It was a thing. And vice versa. You would go to watch a game at the Spectrum. If you had any like Bees logos, your car would get vandalised and you'd get in a punch up. People think ice hockey is a lovely family-friendly sport. They fight on the ice back in the day. Fans, there was a period in time when it was getting more TV coverage, had a national TV deal, and there was some disorder at games. There were punch-ups in the car park. Because alcohol is served. There's no alcohol ban. There's bars at ice rinks. Fans get pissed, especially when you've got very heated rivalry. A lot of the players live locally at this level. People think sports fan disorder is only association football, and then you get the occasional pisshead drunken fan at an NFL game in America, and it's normally in Philadelphia. You get that normal drunk fan who just has a bit too much, bit there, and it's an isolated incident. It isn't. It's really not. You get it at cricket, you get it at rugby league, you get it at rugby union. I mean, rugby fans are generally well behaved, but you will get idiots. That famous story of that kid going with his dad to his first ever test match at what is now the Principality, and the drunk fan behind him throwing up over a 6-year-old kid. I mean, that's introduction to professional sport, lad. That's your first game. You're covered in rather drunk fans' vomit, and your dad's paid 150 quid for the privilege to take you both there. Fantastic. Lovely experience. But we're starting to see it at other sporting events, but people think it's just professional football in Europe where the fans are thugs. It's really not. It's every sport in Europe, the fans are thugs. Honestly, you look at basketball and you look at ice hockey in continental Europe, Jesus Christ, their ultras, their tifosi, something else to behold. When you see flares going off inside an indoor arena at basketball and ice hockey, you know that the fans are loco. They're not sensible people. And of course, having flares inside football stadiums and inside sports arenas and sports stadiums, it's illegal. We don't care. It happens. It's a thing. And it's starting to become a bit more prevalent here in the UK with people smuggling flares into stadiums. Not on the same level as continental Europe, but it's becoming a thing. And yeah, I don't think the North American fans are fully prepared for the nightmare that's going to hit them in 2 years' time. Look what happened at the Copa America final. Look what actually happened at the Copa America, but the final itself was a repeat of what happened at Wembley in 2021.
ticketless fans forcing entry into the stadium. The game kicking off late, unlike Euro 2021, which kicked off on time. What happened at the Copa America final in Miami, was it Hard Rock Stadium? I believe it was. There was a YouTuber, I forget his name, but there's a YouTuber I'm subscribed to, and he was interviewing fans before the games and after the games, mostly US fans, but football fans in general, soccer fans over there, and how they felt things were. And a lot of them said the organisation throughout the tournament was poor, and that a lot of them were complaining about how the US played, and a lot of them always said throughout the tournament, things need to be better with organisation, with security. And then the final happens, and a lot of the fans he interviewed were leaving early with half hour, 45 minutes left to play. And they were saying, yeah, we felt unsafe, we're leaving now. And I don't think the police and USA authorities, or Canadian, obviously it wasn't played in Canada, wasn't played in Mexico, but I don't think the US especially is prepared for the European and South American. Well, they proved they weren't prepared for the South American hardcore fans and hooligans. They're not going to be prepared for what's coming from Europe. Europe is more affluent than South America in general when it comes to disposable income. There are those in South America who are quite wealthy, but when it comes to hardcore sports fans, more disposable income. Now, another thing that was criticised about Copa America was ticket prices. Whereas the Euros, there's a reason why every stadium, every game was sold out, not a spare seat to be had. Not a spare seat to be had. Atmosphere, fantastic. Then I looked at what the tickets were actually going for as price. They were really affordable. Really affordable. Go over to the group stages of the Copa America. We're talking $150 to $250 for the cheapest ticket, €30. And bearing in mind the currencies are nearly equal, €30 is equivalent to about 35. Is it $35? $25, something like that? Very cheap, very affordable, really affordable. $150 to $250 for a cheap ticket for a group stage. Just the comparison in price, which makes me very, very concerned about what the World Cup 2 years' time when the US is co-hosting, and with Canada as well, with the Canadian dollar being as weak as it is, and the Mexican peso being as weak as it is, and fluctuating wildly and being a really unstable currency, what the ticket price is in 3 different currency denominations are going to be like in 2 years' time. What are they going to be charging fans? Because the Copa America was not great. Empty stadiums, empty seats, ticketless fans at the final, poor organisation, poor quality pitches, poor quality officiating, just the whole tournament not being great. I just don't think the organisers are fully prepared for what is going to hit them. They need to look at footage of European, South American fans when it comes to international and club football. They are not prepared. The dry run, the practice run, which was the Copa America, they got ticket price wrong and ticketing strategy. They got security wrong and policing wrong, and it was an embarrassment for the final. The fact that the US struggled was a separate thing, and obviously they're going through the process of replacing Greg Berhalter. He's gone, much like Southgate, looking for a new manager. But the actual organisation and infrastructure, they got wrong. The fact that so many countries that are going to qualify for the World Cup, you require a visa, a tourist visa, which is very expensive. It's not free, it's expensive to go to the US, is going to have an impact. They're going to be relying on expats who've got a residency or workers visa who are currently in the US and Canada, for that matter, in order to, plug the gaps. Fans coming from overseas, I think, are going to be heavily impacted because of visa restrictions. There are some countries that will qualify where you can't even get a visa. Iran and North Korea, for example, are on a visa blacklist. Very, very hard to come from Iran and North Korea to the US and Canada and Mexico. Mexico, not so much. But there are visa restrictions. It's not cheap to get a visa to Canada and the US. The backlog and the length of time it takes to process an application, a lot of times it's rejected.
one of the pitfalls of hosting in North America is the visa requirements and cost. Very expensive. That's before hotel, food and drink costs, which are also very, very high at the moment. A lot higher than in Europe. Inflation's higher. When it comes to exchange rate as well. And then when you're following your team, make sure you have 3 currencies, not just US dollars, but Canadian and Mexican. You've got to have Canadian dollars and Mexican pesos. So you've got to have 3 different exchange rates from your domestic currency, which can most likely be like the euro or the pound. It's going to be expensive for fans. It's not going to be a cheap exercise, especially if your team makes the final. Tickets are going to be a lot more expensive than the Euros we've just seen. And if the Copa America is anything to go by, $150, $250 for a group stage match. It's a World Cup. And it's an expensive thing to host. And then each state and each city has different sales taxes and hotel taxes and costs and tourist taxes. I have some concerns about the 2026 World Cup. I do. I think the football will be great. I think, seeing more teams, I think it's a good thing and a bad thing. There's pros and cons for expanding the tournament, but I'm looking forward to the tournament for a playing standpoint. I have concerns about the logistics, the fan experience, and the quality of atmosphere and security. And I generally have that concern. So we'll see how the World Cup in 2026 plays out with, of course, we're going to have a different Canadian government by that point, probably a different US government, and potentially a different Mexican government. There's going to be a lot of changes socially between now and then. What's going to happen in 2 years? But we're going to have a different president. We don't know who the president of the US is going to be. There's definitely going to be a new prime minister in Canada. I cannot see Trudeau holding on for that much longer before an election has to be called, which has to be soon, right? And of course, costs, they could balloon. Not going to get cheaper. Budgets to get the games and the stadiums up to scratch and the infrastructure in place are going to balloon. And currencies will fluctuate. I can't see the Canadian dollar strengthening anytime. I can see it really going out. And if you are, let's say your team's playing some games in Toronto or Vancouver, and then your nation's playing some games in the US, you're going to have fun with the exchange rate. It's going to be brutal. Toronto and Vancouver are 2 of the most expensive cities to visit in the world. They're not cheap. Hotels aren't cheap. Food's not cheap. Public transit's better in Vancouver and Toronto than in the US, but not cheap. It's very expensive because the Canadian dollar is so bad right now. So yeah, I have my concerns in that regard. But we'll see what happens. It's going to be one of them, I think. What will be interesting is the TV audience as well. I think that's going to be really interesting to see what that's like as well, because it's in the US. So there is that to bear in mind. The domestic audience in the US, Canada, and Mexico, but also the overseas audience, because of time zone differentials, will be interesting. So there's a lot to think about. A lot to think about in that regard as well. So that's something I wanted to cover before, getting off subject a little bit. That's something I wanted to talk about because I've been meaning to do a video on it for a while. But yeah, it's just interesting. It's interesting seeing how things pan out. Now, I'm probably going to watch a little bit of the Olympics now, and I'm going to have to look at some video ideas. I've got some video ideas for content. I've got to do some career videos on players, and I'm going to resume the Football Club History series, and I'm going to look at some more clubs across Europe. That's going to be fun. And we'll also keep an eye on what's happening in French football, because I don't think Bordeaux is going to be the last club in France that's going to go belly up.
And so, oh well, yeah, I've got to check out that website that the video I did on the French football suddenly trended on. It was really interesting. I've never seen something like this before. It was very, very interesting to look at the where people were viewing and how it started trending. Online. The Canadian women's football team. Their coach has been suspended. They were using drones to oh bloody hell! What were they? They were using drones to film opposition teams, how they were watching their training. Excuse me. They were. Here we go. So the fanbanter.co.uk is where the French Football Club video that I did. A lot of viewers in the last month have been on fanbanter.co.uk, and I'm trending on there at the moment. Google, I'm trending on Google at the moment, and there are other ways that people have actually been sharing my videos on WhatsApp, by email, on Facebook. So a lot of people have been using WhatsApp and Facebook. I'm just on my data analytics, but fanbanter.co.uk, that's starting to trend now, where one of my videos, the video I did discussing the French football crisis with finances, is trending on fanbanter.co.uk as a website. Came up. But Google, if you search the channel on Google or put in type in a current subject like the Paul Kent video, the sacking video, is the most popular video the channel has ever seen. People are still watching it now. All these days, all these weeks later, nearly a full month later, people are still watching the Paul Kent sacking video. I mean, he's been sacked for quite some time now. He lost his job nearly a month ago. People are still engaging with that. At the moment, is it the most popular video right now? Is it? Let's have a look. It's still the most popular video over the last month. And then the French Football in Crisis video is the second most popular video over the last month. And a lot of people have been engaging with that in the last couple of days with the news about Bordeaux. Over the last 48 hours, apart from this live stream, it has been the most popular video on the channel. In regards to the Canadian women's coach being, and then of course them being docked 6 points. I'm not surprised with that. But there's been rumours circulating that the Canadian Football Soccer Federation have been using drones to spy on opposition closed training sessions for a couple of years now. Allegations going back to 2021 and even possibly during the COVID lockdowns, and so there's been allegations about coaches and the Canadian Federation being fully aware and endorsing, secretly breaching rules for nearly 4 years. Going back to 2021, those allegations have been floating around. I think it was a game against Honduras with the men's for either the Gold Cup or World Cup qualification for the last World Cup, where rumours were that they were using drones to spy upon opposition training sessions. So these are not new allegations or issues, but the fact that they've had one of their head coach kicked out of the Olympics and thrown out the Olympics and now being docked 6 points in the group stage, that is a statement. That is a statement by the IOC. I think potentially by FIFA as well. That is a statement, and they've done that deliberately to make an example of the national. And this is an organisation, Football Canada, or is it Soccer Canada, Canadian Soccer? The governing body in Canada. We've obviously seen the players
women's players protest and the men's players protest over payments and bonuses and sponsorship deals and how the money and revenue sharing before the last World Cup. We've seen the women's team protest as well before the last Women's World Cup and the men's team. There's been issues between the federation, the Canadian Federation, and both the men's and women's national sides over the last few years, considering that both the men's and women's sides are actually doing pretty well right now. The men's side reaching a semi-final, win a major international tournament, and the women's team being defending Olympic champions and actually doing pretty well in the women's game as well. Admittedly, the last World Cup, they failed to perform, but the men's team have been on the up in recent years. The women's team is one of the best teams at the moment. But there's been a battle between the players and the federation in regards to revenue sharing and who gets what, player payments, player insurance, player centralized contracts, a lot of things off the field to do with finance and things, and because the male players are pretty well compensated, but the women's players aren't. So there's been payment issues and pressure aimed at the federation. There's been bonuses not paid and things going on financially. It's a bit more complicated than I'm making out, but and I'm not fully in tune with everything that's going on in regards to the player actions and the player protests and potential strikes, which have occurred. But we've seen this with the Danish setup. We've seen it with a few national setups, but the fact that they've been doxing, that is a statement by the IOC and FIFA. That is a statement by the governing bodies, by the games organisers, and the sports governing body. That is a big statement. Now, I think other teams are doing what the Canadians have been doing. This is not just one nation doing it. I think this is multiple teams have probably been doing it. They've just been the ones that have been caught. It's like with salary cap breaches in the AFL and NRL in Australia, or scouts and GMs tapping up players in regards to the NHL and NFL drafts, for example. Every team does something they shouldn't, be it at club level or international level. Every team will push the boundaries and break the rules and bend the rules. In this instance, this is the team that has been caught. This is the team that's been punished. Other nations will be doing it and probably have done it for a long time. They will send scouts in with hidden cameras, for example, right in the open training sessions. They'll send. So this has been going on. It's like videotape gate with the Patriots and the Patriots doing it in the NFL. This has been happening for years when it comes to closed training sessions where the media aren't allowed, fans aren't allowed in. It's just players and coaches and backroom staff of the team concerned. This has been happening for years. The Patriots did it in the NFL. I know it's happened in every professional sport at club and international level. It's happened quite regularly. It just so happens that in this case, it's the Canadian Federation and Canadian setup that's been caught out at the Olympics. But the rumours have been circulating for 3-4 years about the entire setup from, the top down, going, okay, we're going to push the boundaries here a little bit, and both the men's and women's setups are going to use these drones, and we're going to push the boundaries a little bit, and push it as far as we can. It's a grey area. Let's push it. Now, when it's a closed training session, yeah, that is something that yeah. But we'll see if there's a fine coming the federation's way as well. Wouldn't surprise me if they are going to get fined, and other punishments coming their way. But it's an Olympic Games. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to end that there. I've got a few video ideas now rattling up in my head a little bit. I will do a video on the 76 Montreal Olympics. There's going to be some more controversies at this Olympics, no doubt. And I'll also look at the medal table after day 3. I think looking at the medal table after day 3 will be really, really interesting. Where nations are at, and I'll look at that tomorrow evening. and we'll see where nations are at in regards to gold, silvers, and bronze. The tiebreaker is gold. The second tiebreaker is silver, obviously, and the third tiebreaker is bronze. So if nations are equal on medals, the first tiebreaker is who's got the most golds. If that is still equal, the second tiebreaker is who's got the most silvers. If that is still equal, then it's obviously bronze, which is the next tiebreaker. But I don't think we get to bronze when it comes to tiebreakers, because normally gold and silver should suffice. So as of start of Olympic activities today, it was Australia, top of the medal table. It'll be interesting to see who's top of the medal table this evening, and then Monday evening it'll be we'll see who's top of the medal table and who's doing what. And as the Olympics goes on, every few days we'll look at the medal table and who's standing where in the standings. It'll be very, very interesting to look at that. And I'll have a look watch as many Olympic events as possible and give my opinions on some of the high-profile events that get a lot of media attention. I might even look at some of those lesser events that people don't necessarily watch as much and cover as much. I think there are some sports at the Olympics that don't get as much coverage. But that's all for me for now. Keep your eyes peeled for Olympic content and other content. But that's all for me for now. And I'll have some more content for you guys very, very soon.